And we're live. Good morning, Richard. Good morning, Jim.
Morning.
Yes.
Welcome, Richard.
Good morning. Good to see you both.
Good to see you. It's been a while.
It has been a while, but I keep up with you guys on the various platforms to see what you're getting up to. I just saw Jim, what were you, riding a motorbike or something the other day?
Yeah, I've been getting back on the bike a fair bit, so...
It looked more like you crashed it rather than riding it, but anyway.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, better that too.
Fair enough.
We obviously keep up with you a fair bit too. It's a lot easier to keep up with you since you put out, multiple YouTube videos a week, it seems. So we can really keep up with everything that's going on.
I have done a lot of videos in the past, probably 2.5 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
Which has been good. I've done, well, as you know, I have done over the years a lot of video production work, and so the YouTube is an extension of that, where it's sort of I'm now the person in front of the camera rather than the person behind it, which is a whole new ball game. It takes a fair bit of getting used to, but it's something that I do enjoy. And I think when you attach it to something you're passionate about, then that makes all the difference.
Makes it a little bit easier and gets rid of the fear of sitting in front of a camera and talking.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got quite a following on YouTube. You've grown your channel to 70,000 subscribers. That's amazing.
Well, it is amazing, but it's taken a fair while. But it's a genre that is really underrepresented on YouTube. There's a few around, and a few fairly large channels that talk about more the astrophotography in the deep sky telescope field.
Yes,
which has been going a lot longer. But the what I specialize in is wide angle nightscape, or astro landscape, if you like.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people out there that are interested in that. But one of the things about that is that I'm just a little Aussie bloke here in Australia, and we're on the other side of the world. I would have probably 30 to 40% of my audience is in the United States, and a lot of them in the UK. So it's a different world where I live to where they are. Different sky. It looks different. The landscape's different. And so that can work both for you and against you. Firstly, it works for you in the sense that people like to see something different.
Yeah.
And we have beautiful night skies here, as you two know. But it works against you in the sense that, this is not where I'm going to go. And so I'm more interested in seeing my local areas and where to go and things like that. So
they want to see what they can actually shoot.
Location scouting tips and things like that they can actually then go and apply and go on a photography trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that, this is actually a question I had for way later in the interview. We're jumping ahead, but why not? Have you thought about doing a trip to somewhere like the US, to some of those beautiful national parks and things, to do some night sky photography?
It's something that obviously COVID changed a lot of things a few years ago. In fact, I was doing a trip to New Zealand that year in 2020. And New Zealand's not that far away from here in Australia, but it's still a trip that I had planned, and it was something that I was going to be going over there with a whole heap of other people and sort of running a mobile workshop thing, which was quite ambitious, to be honest, because and two groups, one after the other. But a week before we were due to fly out, everybody cut the border, and so we missed that trip and really haven't got back onto that. I don't know. The answer is I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see.
But it's not something that you've sort of been, other than New Zealand, which you obviously had planned and ready to go. It's not something you're sort of working on, or you haven't got a road trip across the US mapped out that you just want to go and do, or something like that.
No, it's not mapped out. No, but because I've got a lot of contacts over there, I was running some Zoom sessions all through last year and into this year as well, with groups from Canada and the US and the UK. I've got a lot of contacts over there. A lot of people I know. I feel like I know. I've never met them in person. Although one guy from Texas showed up at one of my workshops a few years ago, and I would have had more, except again for COVID. But Yeah, but you really feel like you have a connection with people, even though you haven't physically met them face to face.
Yes.
So I think that's that's good. But I don't know. It's a big thing to go to a country that you're not familiar with, to run an event in their backyard. So it's a lot easier for me doing it here in my own backyard because I know what I'm doing. I know where to go. I know what things look like here. And over there, it would be you'd have to rely on other people's expertise to get you around to places, or
I was going to say, it would almost be better if you could tee it up with another photographer that you could work with, who knows the area, and then you sort of work together to run maybe a combined event or something like that. But it's a big thing.
True, and I've seen other people do the same thing. So who knows? We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to ask you some questions about where your origin story, how you transitioned into doing night sky photography. What seems to me, it seems like you're doing it almost every night of the week. But but I want to quickly, just for anyone who's not familiar with your work. Now, obviously, Instagram isn't the best way to view photos, and we'll look at some photos on your screen a bit later up close. But I just wanted to show people some of the variety of photos that you post that we see that we're always blown away with, whether it's a self-portrait from, where was this, in Tasmania?
Yeah, that's in Tassie.
That was in Tassie. No, what am I doing here? Time lapses seem to be popping up all the time, which we want to dig into a little bit later about how you actually managed to produce these insane time lapses. And then this sort of thing seems to be, like you say, your forte, which is like light painted art of landscapes and the Milky Way all together in one frame. Would you say that's sort of the thing that's driven your work mostly?
Yeah, it's probably, if you like, my signature. A lot of people say to me, or in fact, just recently I put something on Facebook somewhere, and somebody said, look, I didn't even have to look at the heading. I knew this was one of your pictures.
Yes.
And it's because of the light painting techniques. Now, not everybody who shoots night photography does light painting at all. So it's an art form, and it's something that requires a reasonable amount of practice and skill level to sort of get to look half decent. There's a lot of techniques involved with it, as you can imagine.
Yes. a lot of trial and error as well from my experience.
A lot of failures.
A lot of failures.
Yeah, but anything that's worth doing requires you to jump through those hoops of not getting it right until you do get it right. And after a while, when you do, and it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, you guys have specialized in wedding photography over the years for many years, and you know that. After a while, weddings are very easy for you guys because you do so many of them.
Yeah. Practice. Practice and repetition.
Yep, exactly.
Now we'll look at some more of those photos later, but I just wanted people to get a bit of an idea of when we're talking about landscapes. And actually, you can't really see because we're covering it, but the background of the podcast today is a shot that we took out at the farm with you.
Oh, okay.
And, it's on a very wide angle lens. That's why the horizon's bent. But so we know what you do. How did you get into this? Where did the love of photographing the night sky come from?
Yeah, it's a very good question. To be honest, I've always had a love for the night sky, or just being the night landscape as well. And that stems from when I was a young teenager, and I can remember getting out at our house where I used to live. I'd jump up on the shed roof and just lay down on my back and have a look up there at the sky. And back then I also tried photography, and you're going to laugh because I had my mother's ancient box brownie. It was ancient then, let alone now. Yeah, and black and white 620 film I used to put into that, and I tried taking pictures then. The most success I had was star trails, because you could leave the shutter open on those cameras for whatever length of time you wanted. And just wait for the light to soak in on the film. But short exposures were no good back then. But that's where it started. And I would say that probably I had to wait you know, for many, many years for the camera technology to catch up with the passion. So, you know, it's like photographers are artistic people. It's a bit like musicians. It's a bit like artists. You have this thing that's sort of in your gut, and you can't always put it into words, but you know what it is. You know the feeling of it. And so for me, being able to visualize in a photograph what I could sort of see and feel in my gut or in my heart, if you like, that was important. But I couldn't do it for years and years and years. Then other things come along. You know, you grow up, you get work happens, family happens, all the other things that happen. So I would say probably, another part of the story is I started doing photography and videography as a job. That's what I did full time. Now, that didn't just happen overnight either, because I was in the spare parts industry for many, many years in the auto spare parts. And so then, but I used to do stuff on the weekends. And, you know, this is a familiar story. A lot of people say this, that people would say, oh, they sort of saw that you had a bit of an interest in something, and they want some cheap photos or something. Say, can you come and take
it's usually,
you know what
they're like, oh, we got a quote from a real photographer, and we thought you might be able to do it cheaper.
Yeah, well, back in those days, interesting you say a real photographer, because let's go back 25 years, and I probably go back even a bit further than that when I was doing this stuff. There was a definite profession of a photographer.
Yes.
So these days, every man and his dog is a photographer. They've all got a web page, they've all got a Facebook site, and they're all photography.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to access.
Yeah. So back in those days, there were full-time photographers, and there was a few people who were hobbyists, and that was it. Yep. And so if you went to a studio to hire a photographer, you were going to get a professional. That's all they do. And so they would charge accordingly, I suppose. But anyway, so I used to do a lot of that stuff. I filmed. In fact, I met you, Justin, at a wedding doing a wedding video, and you were doing photography. Yep. And if I remember correctly, you came in on the second shift, so you came in for the evening part of the wedding.
Yeah, that's correct.
I
can't remember how that.
Like just for the reception, was it?
Yeah, there was a photographer. Oh, I'm just trying to remember her name, but she didn't do parties.
No, yes. She had kids. She had young kids, and I think she went home. Family duties called and called in young Justin here to come in and fill in and do the research. I remember talking to you, and you said to me that was your favourite part of the wedding. Anyway, that at that time you were sort of saying, "I love this."
It was like just roll in and shoot the party. Okay, that sounds pretty good to me.
Pretty much.
The pressure's gone then.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the pressure is gone. Yeah,
was it at Sutton Grange?
It was at Sutton Grange Winery, or one of them down there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a fair while ago. So the build up to me getting back to this happened after, I guess I'm trying to say, a lot of things that I learned doing photography, doing videography of different, not just weddings, but live events, theatre, sport, all sorts of things that I did. It taught me a lot about lighting and the understanding of how light works and how it is. And as you know, being for example, a wedding photographer, the majority of your work is done with natural light. You're working with whatever light's available. Now, I know you can add flashes and things into receptions, and we all do that stuff. But the main difference between what I'm doing now and what I did back then was I can actually create some light of my own. And I mean, I'm not lighting a whole landscape. That's impossible. But you can light subject matter in the landscape, and that's where the light painting came from. But the concept of lighting with a torch or a flashlight, like this, right, is completely different to lighting with a studio strobes or even portable flashes. So, but the principles remain the same. And that's the thing that I can remember working through all of this, thinking, how do I get that look with these little devices? And my work with photography and videography over the years enabled me to get a real good background of understanding of what I was trying to achieve. And I did work with some other professional photographers along the way, doing things. for example, Andy Banks. You guys know Andy. Now he's a classic old school full-time professional photographer. That's what he has done for decades. And he was using light meters and all sorts of things. And I said, man, I'm not into that. But you do learn a lot of stuff by watching someone do that thing. And it's a debutante balls. I mean, it's something that's an acquired taste, I can tell you. And you sort of lose the taste pretty quickly after doing a fair few of them.
Yeah, definitely not for us.
No, because it's much more staged and much more set up. But having said that, you still learn a lot. And just little things like that and working, for example, as a wedding videographer, I watched hundreds of wedding photographers do their thing. And they're all different. And you know this, you've worked with other photographers. So you see how people approach things, and you take little bits from everybody else. And I actually did quite a few wedding photos as well. And I gave up wedding photography back in about 2018, or I reckon was the last one I did, mainly because they're very tiring, and I was sort of getting to a stage where my back was giving in on me halfway through, and I'm thinking, I'm getting too old for this. But the last, probably the last few weddings I did, the reason they were interested in getting me to do it was because they wanted some night photos, and I took night photos of them. And I mean, you guys do the same thing. So you just learn stuff as you go along. So in a nutshell, that's my story. And now in more recent years, I've pretty much almost dropped everything else off, and this is all I'm doing now. And I enjoy it. I mean, it's something that's still my passion. But as you would know, and as a lot of people know, there's a fine line between doing something because you love it and because it's your job. Yes. And so I think it's really important to have a real definite, what's the word? Delineate, is that a word? Between one and the other, and understand where the boundary is. And so, for example, to give you an idea of that, on Thursday this week, I'm heading to Tasmania on a road trip, right? I'm going to be there for 2 weeks, all by myself, just taking photos and probably making videos. No workshops or anything like that, because I know that I need that creative space to do what I do rather than always be there for another reason.
Yes.
And that's something that I think I learned that many years ago in other fields. But, because the more creative people are, the more you feel like you get backed into creative corners. And the more you're in a corner as a creative, then the less productive you become. And so that's how I feel about it. So it's really easy to lose sight of the passion and the love. So I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's a very smart way to go about it. And I mean, look, arguably, like if you make pictures and you make videos, you are still, somewhat working. You'll still be moving yourself forward with your overall goals and that kind of thing. But you've got space and time alone to sort of push yourself creatively. I think that's an awesome way to go about it. While Jim's just disappeared for a second, we've got some chats coming in. Don't forget, if you're listening live, ask us some questions in the chat. Richard is here, and he is the guru of all things Nightscape photography. So ask away. We've got, I think it must be Drake, joining in from Vancouver Island, Canada. Great to see the live chat. Thank you. Ask questions. Hit us up.
Yeah.
We've got Grant, who is actually one of the hosts of our regular Thursday shows that we do. Grant jumps in with us, and people just ask us anything about anything. So he's got some questions about time lapses and stuff that I'm going to ask a bit later on. Hi, Grant. And Elaine is also in the chat too. She says Richard got the background lighting memo. But Jim didn't. Yes,
it's a work in progress.
Right. Yeah. I think we've coordinated our background lighting quite nicely. It's good.
I'm going pink today.
It's very nice. Does yours change colours too?
The problem is they're battery operated lights, so if we go too long, they might just conk out.
That's perfect. That means that when they die, that means we've done a good job. We've kept you on here for as long as possible. No, very well. That's exciting. So you got a trip coming up to Tassie. A road trip by yourself for 2 weeks. What do you take all of your gear when you go on a trip like that? Do you just load the car up with everything that you own that is photography related?
I wouldn't fit it all in the car in one trip if I did that. But it's always a problem because what do I take and what do I leave home? So I'm always going through in my mind, what do I really need and what can I do without? The car's going to be pretty full. I'll have a roof box and all sorts of things, as well as bedding, because I bunk down in the bed on many nights when I'm down there. Because I like to be on location, it makes it a whole lot easier, because if you can imagine doing a road trip that is focusing on night photography, then you need to be on location at night.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to do, say, a landscape photography thing, you might want to see a sunrise or a sunset, but you actually sleep during the night, which I will too. But you still got to get to location, and some of the places where you want to get to is nowhere near a accommodation, nowhere near a caravan park, nowhere near a hotel or something. So
you sleep in the car?
Yeah. I do. Now you wouldn't fit, Jim, I don't think, but I'm just on 6 feet tall, and I can fit in the Subaru Outback. Yeah. Probably got a picture of it somewhere, but anyway. Anyone who's seen
I was about to say, I love seeing your car pictures over the years. The car like astro picture. They're probably some of the nicest photos ever taken of what car did you have before the Subaru?
I had a Falcon station wagon.
Yeah, the Falcon wagon. I was like, I don't know if anyone would have ever taken a photo like this of a Falcon station wagon.
No, they probably haven't. The Falcon was good because it's a nice long car. You fit a lot of stuff in the Falcon wagon. So I'm now driving a Subaru Outback, which is a great car. Like semi off-road. It's not a full four-wheel drive, but it's all-wheel drive, and it will not get bogged anywhere. It's fantastic. It's a nice lightweight car.
Yes.
It's not a racing machine by any means, but it's a very, very good vehicle for what I do. It's got enough off-road ability to be able to get me into some of the places where I need to go. It's a low profile in, it doesn't hit overhanging trees or any of that sort of rubbish. I can't find a picture off the top of my head of my car. That's sad, isn't it?
Especially when it's so well photographed in the night.
I've got plenty of it. Yeah.
Got a comment here from Julie M. Interesting way to think about it, Richard. I am by no means as creative as you, but I know if I can't get out somewhere to express my creativity or just get into nature, I get itchy feet.
Yeah. Yes. Now I know Julie. She's a good photographer, and I think she's been along to one of my workshops. But I think a lot of people can't actually put into words what I said before about being backed into creative corners, but they feel it. The artists feel things. They don't necessarily elaborate on the description of what things are. So, it's a matter of getting into creative space. And I think it's a key, because a lot of artistic people can be a little bit depressive by nature, melancholy, if you like. And we have this way of sort of feeling things rather than expressing them. But the expression comes through the art or the photography or the music or the whatever it is we do that's a creative outlet. And so it's really important to have a creative outlet.
Yeah, I think I'm feeling that a little bit at the moment with my photography and thing. I'm trying to, I feel a little bit empty in terms of creating anything interesting.
Have you? Sorry,
go on, Jip.
No, I was going to say, have you shot anything for yourself?
Well, other than yesterday, Grant and I attempted to play a game of photography bingo, which we'll talk about on Thursday. That was a very interesting game. You'll have to be the judge, Jim, of our photos. So I did that. I mean, a lot of the stuff I do because I'm shooting a lot of mountain biking is a passion as well. But we're often on time pressures. We've got a job to do. It's a little bit harder to be creative, and you often then feel like you're sort of repeating a workflow pattern, which is the same way we'd get into with wedding photography as well. And with wedding photography, it's critical that you actually follow that workflow pattern, because you've got a really important job to do. So you can't stray too creatively and be like, oh, I'm going to, you know, today I'm going to shoot all the photos upside down or something, you know, like,
Yeah.
because you've got a job to do. I think, and what's interesting is, as you would know, Jim, I've been talking a lot about buying new gear. And I think that wanting new gear or different gear is a manifestation of me not creating something and it makes me just think, oh well, if I had different gear, that would be a new challenge and a fun new thing to learn, which might make me more interested, you know.
So what you're saying is you don't need new gear, you just need to use the gear you've currently got.
That is absolutely correct, but also it's not going to stop me.
So Grant, take note.
Do you ever get that, Richard? Obviously, you've somewhat. I would say you probably never. You would never feel like you've mastered night sky photography. But do you ever feel like you need? You start looking for different techniques or different gear because you sort of feel like, you know what you're going to produce before you even produce it. If you go out on a shoot.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because the Nightscape photography is heavily gear dependent. So even though you will hear a lot about being able to shoot with any camera, the reality is if you want a really, really top-notch image, you need a really good quality camera and lens. It's just the reality because you're pushing that thing to its extreme limits of, you know, low lightability, high ISO performance, all those sorts of things. And, you know, it's all cameras are not created equal when it comes to that particular thing. So, yes, I'm always looking at stuff. And also the other thing that comes down to it, because I'm how can I put this? Because I'm in the education space, if you like, when it comes to this, running workshops and so forth, you need to know what's going on in the world. You need to know what people are using. You need to know what new stuff is out there and the gains that have been made. And in recent times, there have been a lot of gains in camera performance relating to low light photography. It's just the way it is. The technology is really racing ahead, and all brands are doing that. So, and honestly, you can't have everything. You can't spread yourself too much across all the different brands because it costs an absolute fortune to do that. What a lot of, speaking of YouTubers, and just talking about YouTube, I don't know if you want to talk about that later, but there are, when it comes to YouTube, and I'll just mention it now, you can elaborate later if you want to, but there are two types of YouTubers when it comes to photography. There are photographers who are on YouTube, and there are YouTubers who do photography. And so the YouTubers who do photography are reviewers. They'll review 1 million cameras and 1 million lenses, but they never actually use any of that stuff in the real world. Or they might on the odd occasion when they actually do something. But then you have photographers who actually have YouTube channels, and they're more about actually getting photos and just using the gear and showing you what they do to get the photo. So it's an interesting conundrum. And even though I guess by definition, I'm a YouTuber, right? And you guys are too, because you're on YouTube. But you would never say that you're not a photographer first. And so people judge you by, essentially they judge you by your quality of work or your portfolio, if you like, of work that you have, more so than what you say. And I say that because YouTube, anyone can get on YouTube. It's free. You don't even have to, you don't need to get a university degree to be a YouTuber.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, you don't have to be a photographer either.
That's very true. But you quickly get shot down if your work's no good. But you can get on YouTube and say anything about anything. And if you're a believable person, people will follow, and they will follow. So you become an influencer. And I hate that word. And I hate the concept of influencers because, you know, it's sort of a connotation that indicates that because you do something, everyone else will do the same thing. And that is not creativity at all. That is just cookie cutter stuff. And I'm not into that. But anyway, I don't even know how we got onto that discussion. Sorry.
I'm not sure either, but I definitely do want to talk about YouTube later because it's something that obviously we've started doing and I want to do more of. And you've certainly done a lot of it. But actually, first, we've got a few comments coming in. Brian's Builds and Outdoors says afternoon all.
Afternoon.
Yeah. Hello, Brian.
Grant is very happy that we're classified as YouTubers, as am I.
Yeah. Well, you are. You are.
And Julie says she's been to 2 workshops and she wanted to know, have you ever got stuck anywhere, Richard?
Oh,
I guess
okay.
out on a shoot.
Yeah. No, but I've nearly got bogged in the Falcon a couple of times.
Is that why the upgrade to the Subaru?
Well, yeah, I've done about 320,000 Ks in that Falcon, so
wow.
it was due for an upgrade. But no, I've never been stuck anywhere. But that's actually a good question, Julie, because preparation is key to any of these trips that I do, and probably anyone does. But you've got to make sure you've got backup plans for if something goes wrong. For example, I carry a whole heap of jump starting devices. I've got one of these little Garmin InReach thingos, which is an emergency beacon.
Yeah.
So if, for example, in Tasmania, half of the state doesn't have phone coverage. So, you can be somewhere and stuck and no one knows. So a gadget like that is a satellite device. So it can be pretty much picked up anywhere. It has an emergency, but it also has a text function. So you can actually send a message to someone, say, I'm okay, I'm just out of phone range, for example. So no, I haven't been stuck anywhere, but I'm very careful as well.
Okay. Got another one coming in from Drake, I think, again. When you go on a trip, how do you find a location that will be good for a nightscape image with something nice in the background? Oh, in the foreground, sorry. Is it online searches, just driving around and looking? How do you scout that stuff out? It's a great question. I mean, for Tassie, like, what are your plans?
Well, yeah, this is something that I talk about a lot in my videos. But firstly, because it's somewhere where I'm not able to go and have a look at first. In other words, I do a lot of searching online. I'll look up YouTube and follow other people that have been there. Now, one of the biggest problems when you go to a place like Tasmania is the majority of YouTube videos are tourists. So they go into tourist hotspots. Now, I can tell you now that I'm not going to very many tourist hotspots because they're the ones that are full of people, even at night time or whatever, potentially. So I do that. I look up Google Maps for directions and concepts and road maps and all that sort of stuff. I've been there a couple of times already in the past 4 years, so I've got a bit of an idea about the place. But to be honest, the biggest is I just go there and drive around looking for locations. Get off the main road, take a few roads into the bush and see where that takes you within reason. I mean, the last thing I want to do is go into some bush track and not be able to get out of there. So I don't do that. But at the same time, follow the coast, for example. If you go to the Bay of Fires, there's a composition just about every five meters down there. So, and sometimes you don't need to go to the tourist hotspot to get a shot that is just as good as the tourist hotspot. But yeah, it's a good question because I do a lot of driving around. If I'm home, for example, I'll just drive around. I'll just take a half a day driving somewhere to see if I can find somewhere that I can come back to at a later date. Yeah. So that's what I do.
How do you know that, say, something that you see out on a back road somewhere, how do you know that the sky's going to be dark enough? Are you far enough away from light pollution and that kind of thing? And how do you know where particular parts of the night sky are going to be at that time of the year?
Okay, well that's a good question too. Now, basically, the night sky repeats itself every year. So, in other words, for example, if you've got in Australia or in the Southern Hemisphere, we have the Milky Way galactic core sort of rises at a certain place in the sky and goes right across, and it's sort of right above your head in the middle of winter, for example, here in July, and then sets over into the west as you get further into the year. Now, that happens at the same time and date every year. It's the same every year. It's like a cycle. So all you need to, after a while, you realize, okay, in March, April, May, June, I'll look to the east. That's where the Milky Way is going to be. in August, September, October, I look to the west because that's where it always is at that time of year. Now, there are some months, for example, end of May, start into June, where you can get the whole thing during the night, depending on what time of night you are. Now, here in the Southern Hemisphere, that's winter for us. So they're long nights, lots of darkness. So, for example, at sunset in June, let's just say, for example, you've got the Milky Way galactic core rising up there in the east, and it's there all night, and by sunrise, it's setting over in the west. So you've got all night to get all sorts of different compositions. But there are also other apps that help you. Now, one of the best things that I've found is Stellarium. It's a planetarium program that's free download on a desktop. Pay a few dollars on a mobile phone, and it's basically just shows you the whole night sky, depending on your location in the world. You just punch in your town or your country, and it shows you what the night sky looks like at any time or date. So it shows you all the different constellations, and it shows you when the moon's rising, when the moon's setting, when sunrise, sunset, all those basic things, and it gives you directions. So it tells you the exact compass direction. Now, the other one a lot of people use is Photo Pills. Now, I'm sure most people listening to this would have heard of Photo Pills because it's an app that's used not just for night photography. It's got a lot of stuff in it for just general photography, and it's very good.
We use a lot.
Yeah. A lot of people use it, and it is fantastic. But one of the things that I find quite useful is a simple compass. In other words, and every phone has a compass in it. GPS in the car's got a compass. So I know, given the information I just mentioned about the Milky Way is always in the same place at the same time, at the same year, every year. And to prove that, you can go into a program like Stellarium and go back 20 years or go forward 20 years and just have a look. And you'll see, it jumps around a little bit, but it's in exactly the same position. So as the Earth rotates around the sun, the angles haven't changed much. Now, okay, so you got the Big Bang Theory or something happening where all the stars are going at 1 million miles an hour, but it doesn't look like it because space is so big. You don't notice any of the movement, if you like. So that's in the back of my brain is always that. Now, when it comes to a specific location, I mentioned before a compass, very handy device because I know that where I live here in central Victoria, at about, let's just say 110 degree east direction, that's where the Milky Way comes up. It always does, 110 degrees. So all I need is a compass and say, okay, I want to take a picture of that rock over there on a mountain. I'll just get in the orientation that has that at about 110 degrees and I'll get it. Now, that sounds like it's being exact, but the Milky Way is much bigger than just one compass bearing. It stretches right across the sky. So if you're using a wide angle lens, you're going to get it. It's pretty hard to miss. Now, if you're in a dark sky location, then you just look up and you can see where it is. Now, I appreciate that a lot of people listening to this might be in light polluted areas where it's a bit hard to see and you're more relying on your camera to pick things up than your eye to see. So that's where you need a bit of help with some of these apps and so forth. But they are helpful for sure.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, that's a Photo Pills is something I've used for years, but I never realized that it just repeats the same pattern every year. I didn't. I just thought that app had a really good I don't know the way you can plan into the future and see things. I just thought it had that all sort of mapped out for the future. I didn't realize it was a repeating pattern.
Yeah, it is.
So that's
if you're
amazing.
in a different location on the planet, it's obviously different to where.
Yes.
But it is a repeatable thing. Now, unless the Earth tilts on its axis or some crazy thing, that will change. And according to some people, that might happen. But as it stands, as we are right at this very moment, that's a repeatable thing.
Yeah. Got a couple more chats coming in from John Rutter Photography, the undisputed king of light painting. Tatti.
John is a legend. You guys might not have heard of John, but if you look him up when you finish this, he is an absolute legend. He lives up in New South Wales. Another Aussie Nightscape photographer. Yeah, he's awesome.
We'll definitely have to check him out. He's got a great question here too, but I won't jump into it just yet. I want to save it for later. But who knows? Maybe John will want to come on the podcast one day.
He'd be worth having.
We've also got Doug Ingram. No questions from me, but I want to acknowledge Richard for how generous he is with tips and tutorials online and for how he loves to encourage other photographers.
Well,
agreed.
Doug is another legend. He's another Nightscape photographer from Sydney. So I'm getting a few mates on here, and I paid all the guys to come on.
You paid them to come on.
I paid them. There's other table stuff going on here.
Or are they just all accounts that you've started up and you just
they
popping
don't
these
exist.
in?
No, those boys and Julie before, they're fantastic. They're people, and Drake is I think he's one of my YouTube followers from Canada. So good on you, Drake.
Awesome, very cool.
There could be others there. I'm not paying attention, but
I'll keep an eye on everything and I'll bring them up so you can see. A question from Grant. How do you prepare for colder nights out shooting with regards to both yourself but also your gear?
That's a good question, Grant. Well, for yourself, basically, you just layer up. You make sure that you're. I think the key is to not start cold. So make sure you don't go out feeling cold already. Like warm yourself up. Put 2 layers of socks on. Or some people feel the cold a lot more than others. I'm pretty good with it. And to be absolutely honest, you really wouldn't do this if you really hated the cold, because it does get pretty cold at night in winter. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. A lot of people listening to this who may live in Canada, may live in Europe or Scotland or somewhere would laugh at us thinking it's cold here in Australia because it really isn't.
No.
But it's a good question nevertheless, because if you're cold and uncomfortable, you will not get the best results and you'll just go home. That's as simple as that. As far as looking after, so basically layering up, having options. I always take a thermos with me, hot cup of tea or coffee or something like that. Does help. And, jump in the car, turn the heater on. There's lots of things you can do to sort of get yourself going again. As far as the gear is concerned, one of my most vital pieces of equipment is a lens warmer. So I've got one here. Some of you can see. It's just a thing that you wrap around your lens. A Velcro strap. It goes on the lens like that. And it plugs into a battery pack. So hopefully you can see that. It just wraps over, plugs into a USB power bank, and the lens will not fog up with that on. Now, I have a lot of problem with lenses fogging up. And over the years, I have skimped on using a lens warmer and paid the penalty for having fogged up images by the time, especially time lapses. If you've got a time lapse going, a sequence of 400 or 500 images, and you walk away and come back 3 hours later, the last thing you want to see is a fogged up lens on the front of your camera. I use these things all the time. And if you've got a big lens, like let's have a look at this one. Oh, it's a bit hard to tell, but that's a Nikon 14-24 f2.8 Z mount.
I was going to say that's a new one.
It's got a pretty big. Yeah, it's a newer one. It's got a pretty big element. And you guys would know the earlier version, the 14-24 f2.8.
Yeah.
Great big bulbous element. Now they fog up like crazy. It's hard to protect them because the lens hoods aren't big on those things because the lens is just too big. So I have a lens warmer on that all the time. I use this for time lapse. You're going to laugh at me, you guys. I use this lens nearly exclusively for time lapse. Okay. I don't know many people would spend the money on that lens.
No.
Just a time lapse.
So why is that not a lens that you often use for your landscape style night photography?
Mainly because of the focal length. I prefer 20mm, which is this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now this is a 20mm f1.8 native Z mount.
Yeah.
Now that obviously does 20mm as well because it's a 14-24, but this is a better lens at 20mm than that one is.
Yes.
And it's prime lens. I prefer prime lenses for a lot of reasons. And just one simple one as a practical illustration is, for example, I wrap a lens warmer around that. Suddenly I've covered up the zoom ring. It's harder to get to, and it's easy sometimes to bump the focus ring I've mentioned, and it's sometimes easy to bump the zoom ring and think, oh, hang on, I thought that was at 14, now it's at 24. You know, I'm at the wrong end of the zoom range because it may be covered in frost or something. Who knows? Yep. These are just 1%ers. Now, with this sort of nightscape photography, I talk a lot about 1%ers. They're the little things that eventually add up to a big proportion of your time spent doing what you're doing. So it's easy to think about the big stuff like cameras, lenses, your tripods. They're big stuff. But the little tiny things that add up and the little things that can cause frustration, a bit like Grant's question about how do you prepare for colder weather, just having gloves, for example, it just makes a big difference. And then you might have big, thick, heavy gloves and you can't actually operate the camera with them because you've got to take the gloves off every time you want to operate your camera. So I've worked out over the years just to use really thin sort of cotton gloves with other gloves over the top. Just little things like that you work out by doing something for a period of time.
Yeah. It's a big investment in time to lose on a small, like a 1% thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I with gloves are an interesting one. With night photography, I haven't done enough of it to have to worry about it too much. But I've shot a lot of winter sports, snow photography, and things. And I've done similar things where I've got a glove liner and then a bigger mitt. So because the problem is, you take your gloves off to do something that's more fiddly, and it doesn't take long for your hands to get cold. If you don't have a glove liner on, and then once you put it back in, it takes forever to get them warm again. So if you can, having those thinner gloves and then a bigger one for just kind of in between shooting, that's a good strategy. We also actually, a friend of mine makes winter gloves for photographers where the fingers fold back, which are an option as well.
Yes, I've seen people with those. Yeah.
If you ever want to try some, they're all over the place. I got tons of them. What have we got in the chat here? We have got Joel Bramley, finally off work meetings and can listen for a bit. I assume you asked permission to shoot on some land and wonder how interested the landholders are in what you are doing. So you're assuming private property, Joel. Do you ever shoot on private property, Richard? How do you go about that?
I do all the time. So I don't know if you guys know Joel, but he's a great photographer as well. Local Bendigo.
I was going to say it's from Bendigo.
Yep.
Yeah. I do. I speak to hundreds of farmers and landholders, and let me tell you, they love talking about their stuff. So, if I find something I want to take a photo of, and this will be in the daytime scout somewhere, right? And say I see an old machine in a farm, and I think, oh, gee, I'd love to get there, but it's a couple of 100 meters in the paddock somewhere. I think, oh well, I better find out who owns this. And there's a number of reasons. Firstly, it's the polite thing to do. Secondly, you just don't know what else is in that paddock. I've been chased by bulls once, and I've had a shotgun shot over me once.
Whoa!
That's a long
Seriously?
Story. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot from a long way away. It wasn't anywhere near me, but it was to scare me off. Now, the funny story about that is, and I'll get on to Joel's question in a minute, but the funny story about that was that I'd already teed up with the guy to go to that spot, but he forgot to tell the guy who was on site, who was like a live-in worker, if you like, on this farm. And he put a shot up, and then I thought I was just about climbing over a fence. So here's me climbing over a fence. And by the way, that was an electric fence. I was climbing over to get into the property because he had cows in there. And bang, this shotgun goes off. Can you imagine what that's like in the middle of the night? It was loud as anything. And then 5 minutes later, this four-wheel drive comes flying up the road and parked behind my car with the headlights on. And by this stage, I'm getting off the fence and going back to the car thinking I could be in trouble here. And anyway, the guy gets out of the car and he said, "Oh, it's you. I forgot you were coming." And he had a bit of a laugh about it. And he says, "Oh, that's right. My mate down at the farm, we've had a few people sort of coming on trying to knock off bits and whatever." And I said, "Oh, that's okay." So, and I said to the guy, "Oh, do you mind if I go in there now?" So I went and got my shots and everything. But what I do, so in answer to Joel's original question, I talk to a lot of farmers, and not once have I ever had someone say, "No, you can't come in." Every single time they say, "Yeah, no worries. I'm happy for you to do that. But what you've got to do is prove to them your fair income. You are who you are and what you're doing. So I just show them on my phone the pictures I take. Sometimes I might have some calendars. I do calendars. So sometimes I've got one of those in the car and I'll give them a calendar and say, here. And other times what I will do quite often is I'll actually say to them, look, I'll give you a photo of this. I'll come back at some stage, I'll give you a print. And I've done that many, many times. And they absolutely love that stuff. Yeah. And I've had a few occasions where these farmers will say, oh, look, have you got 20 minutes? I say, oh, yeah, jump in the ute, we'll go, I'll show you some more stuff. And this happens all the time where you can't actually see from the road what they've got. And so in answer to Joel's question, I do ask permission, unless something's right on the corner of a paddock where, you don't have to go in, you don't have to really do much to take a photo of it. Then, it doesn't really matter. But there has been the odd occasion where I haven't been able to find an owner. In fact, I was up at Bonnie Doon once, which is in the middle of nowhere up near Lake Eildon, and I found this old ruin, and I thought, well, I wonder who owns this. So I went to the closest house. They said, no, we don't own that place. The person who owns that house lives in Melbourne. It was just an old ruin. No one lives there. It's just a cow paddock, really. Yeah. And I said, do you reckon that? I said to this person, do you reckon they'd mind if I took photos of their house? No, they wouldn't mind at all. Go for it. So I did. So I didn't know who owned it, but I actually did follow it up and try and get permission if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's probably easier to talk to them during the day rather than meeting them in the middle of the night, thinking that you're trying to steal their animals, or
Exactly.
You're obviously, there's no malice from you, but they don't know that.
Exactly. And the thing is, at night time, if you say you're walking around a paddock with a torch, a head torch or something, you can see it for miles.
Yeah.
So people do think the worst. They think, well, what are they doing down there? And one of the guys I remember said to me ages ago, he said, look, we've had people come in and just literally take bits off our old cars in the paddock, and, they don't ask permission. They just steal stuff. So, yeah, I can understand
people being a bit sort of worried and apprehensive, and good question here from Mark. I think Mark Timonen. When shooting a photo on someone's property, do you ever give them a print or offer them something like that to show appreciation for shooting on their property?
Yeah, so that's what I was just saying before. I do that, and in fact, I've established some really good relationships with a lot of people because of doing that. Some of them I go back to every year and give them a free calendar every year.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm one of those people that likes to be polite with people and respect their own property. If you like, there's this one lady. You'll laugh at this one. Older lady. Her husband died a few years ago, and I remember knocking on the door once, and I said, "Oh, do you own that old header down the road, a harvester on a paddock?" She said, "No, I don't. But I know who does." And she said, do you want to talk to him on the phone? I said, oh, okay. And she grabbed the phone and just started dialing. She didn't even look up a phone book. And then she said, here you go. And she gave me the phone, and I had to talk to this complete stranger on the phone. Anyway, it worked out okay. And this particular lady, she knows everybody in the community. And she's on her own now. Her husband died a few years ago. She'd be probably 80 now. And so I drop a calendar into her every year, and every time I go there, she's got a cup of tea and a biscuit waiting for me. It's just that people, they love their rural lifestyle. They love their farms. And if someone comes in and shows interest with their stuff, they absolutely love it. And a funny side story. Sorry about the side story, but
no, the side stories are the best part of this podcast.
Yeah.
Her nephew was there once when I arrived, and he's a farmer too, a dairy farmer. So he was covered in, well, you can imagine what he's covered in. Yeah. Anyway, he comes in, and I showed him some pictures. He said, oh, what a beautiful picture. He ordered a print off me just there and then on the spot, a big canvas print. But anyway, that's another story. But he said, I just got my new car. So you want to have a look? So we went outside, and he had a Tesla. And I thought, a farmer with a Tesla, that doesn't quite work.
No.
He said, oh, do you want to go for a ride? And I said, oh, okay. Yeah. He said, you can drive. So here's me jumping in the driver's seat of this Tesla. And we got down the road a little bit. It's in the middle of nowhere, no traffic around. And he said, right, I just pull up in the middle of the road here. I said, what? He said, okay. He said, just floor it, just boot it. And I did. And I could not believe how quick that thing was. I've never driven a car as fast as a Tesla. I don't know what model it was. I can't remember. That thing put me right back in the back seat. Jim, you would have loved it. It didn't have any sound though. There's no note. There's no growl of a V8. Nothing like that. But boy, it was fast.
That would be so weird.
So cool.
It was very weird. Anyway, sorry, that's way off track.
That's all right. That's all right.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah,
we've got
where the best stories are.
Got chats coming in everywhere. Julie wanted to mention she keeps hot hands in her pockets. It's a smart idea.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
Lonnie, any plans for a workshop in the US? If so, she's in.
Yeah, thanks, Lonnie. Lonnie's another great photographer over there that I know of. No plans, Lonnie, but maybe one day. Is that okay? Yeah.
And another one from Julie. Have you ever had any concerns for your safety when out alone at stupid o'clock? I assume obviously getting shot at qualify for that one. Any other? No. I get spooked easily. The few times I've done night sky photography by myself, which isn't many, I get in my own head and I'm looking around and it gets weird.
Well, the short answer, Julie, is no. I don't get spooked easily, but I understand why people do. Now, there's logic to this though. So the average person has a fear of the dark. Kids have a fear of the dark, and we grow up with that. Now, the thing that alleviates that is, one, is preparation. We know where we are. We know what's around us. We know if there's any danger, like a cliff face or something like that. Mm-hmm. And two is basically an understanding that human beings can't see in the dark. Now, there might be animals that can. So that's another thing we can put off to one side. But here in Australia, we don't have dangerous animals. Well, unless you live in the Northern Territory. But I'm not going shooting at night in the Northern Territory with crocodiles. But kangaroos, they're harmless. All the other possums and things, they're harmless. They don't hurt you. Kangaroos, by the way, are very dangerous on the road when you're driving. But apart from that, and that's why I have a bull bar on my car, human beings cannot see in the dark. So I've often thought to myself, okay, I went up to a place at the Grampians called Hollow Mountain, and when you're at the top of the mountain, you can see 360 degree. You can see all the tracks that lead up to the top. Mm-hmm. Now, if there was someone coming up there, there'd be lights everywhere because you cannot negotiate any of those tracks in the dark without lights. And so I know I can even see the car park. So if a car arrived, I can see it from up there. So oftentimes I know if there's anyone around. It's just the way it is. Sometimes you'll see a few hikers at night. In the mountains, you see hikers going at nighttime. But no, I've never had any encounters with anyone at nighttime, ever. Because the reality is they're not stupid enough to be out there at nighttime in the freezing cold, often, without a reason. If they've ever mugged someone, they'll go to a city.
Yeah. Not some random panic.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That does lead into a good question from Joel. When do you sleep between scouting, shooting, and editing? And I actually wanted to add more to that because I had this in my notes as well. How do you deal with your sleep schedule changing from going from running a workshop, for a week doing night sky photography to I assume you're not nocturnal. I assume at some point you're awake during the day as well. How do you deal with that?
Well, it can be tricky. I don't have a full-time job to go to in the daytime, so I sleep in. If I'm out late during a night, I'll sleep in the morning. I'm a person I'm a night person, not a morning person. So if, say, for example, I'm out and I get home late, it's easy for me to sleep in. Whereas some people just can't sleep in. They have to be up at 6:30, 7 o'clock every day, no matter what. Now, if I'm running workshops, it's a lot harder because you don't have the ability to sleep in much. And also you have in your mind, you've always got the responsibility of people that are there. So it's harder to sleep. So I come home from those feeling very drained, very tired, and I usually need a couple of days to recover. As a general rule, I used to have a policy that I wouldn't go out 2 nights in a row. Because obviously that would be something that you'd impact on your sleep habits. But even recently, I've been doing that a fair bit. because there's things like Aurora is happening, and you think, oh, it's on again tonight. What am I going to do?
Get sucked in.
You get sucked in. And when this road trip's happening in Tassie, I'll be, who knows what I'll be doing. I won't be getting much sleep down there. So I just pace myself. I don't do, one of the things I would say, I don't exert myself physically too much. Like I don't mountain climb to get to a location, because I know by the time, if I did that, I'd be exhausted. Or I don't do it very often because I'd be exhausted when I get back down again, and my body would be aching. I'd be tired. Everything would hurt, So I just think about, I take steps to do, but I do try and get sleep during the mornings in the daytime if I can. But it's not.
It's probably a good time. I've got so many things that I want to ask you about, including gear. But maybe before we get to that, your workshops, you've been running them for a while.
Yeah.
How do they work? What's your, well, like we've been to one. Part of it though, because we were shooting weddings at the time, so it was like I went to one. I don't know. You didn't come to that one, did you? No, we just went out for a night.
Us three, yeah.
We just went out for a shoot, basically. Well, when you came, Justin, way back at the start, and you came and went as well, which was a bit different. Typically, what I do is run 2 day, 2 night workshops. That's what I typically run. And the reason for that, and they're live-in workshops, so people come and stay at the location. So they're limited numbers.
How many people usually?
Normally 5. Yep. So I've had as many as 6 or 7, and I've done a few workshops which have been like one night events where I've had up to 12 people, and that is a nightmare because it's really hard to manage that many people on location somewhere. But 5 people, in the dark, and they've been
split yourself so many.
They've been typically at a location that's not as familiar with me because I've been somewhere closer to where they come from. But typically I'll have 5 people. But I run 2 day, 2 night workshops because I've found that doing this type of photography requires a lot of time to discuss, a lot of time to do, and a lot of time in editing. So I reckon more than any other genre of photography, there's more editing involved in this than anything else. So, for example, you guys do weddings and events, so you know what I'm talking about. You might have, let's just say you've got 1,000 photos that you've just shot on an event. Now, you need to be able to get through those pretty quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare for you to back up wedding after wedding after wedding. So you have all sorts of methods and presets and things that you always do on your pictures. And it's the same with a lot of sport photography. I used to do a lot of football. And in fact, I used to shoot in JPEG deliberately for football because I didn't want to edit a heap of raw photos. For a lot of reasons, it's easier to shoot in JPEG, quicker, better burst rates and buffer and all the other things that goes with it, and less editing. But with this, I can't do any of that. I've got to spend a lot of time on each individual image. Requires a lot of time. People who come to the workshops want to know how to edit pictures. You can't possibly do all of this in a one night event. It just doesn't fit. You need headspace, you need time, and it also gives you double the opportunity to get a decent clear sky at night if you have 2 in a row.
Yes.
So that's what we do. We run those at a farm. My wife, Glennis, comes out and does all the cooking, which is great because I can't cook to save myself. If it was me, we'd be living on, well, I don't know what noodles or something. Yeah. Something like that. So, and we go to a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere, which has had a lot of stuff already built in. There's stuff in paddocks that we take photos of. So it's easy from logistically. You don't drive anywhere. It's logistically easy. You can come in. There's toilets available. You can come in, have a cuppa. You can rest, in between little mini shoots. So that's what I do. I've done a few things on location away from that environment, and it is a lot harder.
Yeah. We've got processes, you got things set up. It makes it a lot easier knowing.
Yeah. Well, then people can also, and yourself, you can focus on teaching and people can focus on learning, and there's less focus on the logistics of just being out.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I think it's whereas it would be more of maybe an adventure and experience, maybe less about teaching and more about if you were taking people out to a location,
Yes.
It's more of an immersive experience, but that you can't really do as much teaching realistically.
Yeah. So the thing is, and that's a really good point you've made there, Justin, because the majority of photography workshops, and I'm talking mainly landscape photography here, not so much portraiture or other things. They're more hands-on in certain genres. But let's say landscape photography, the majority of them would be more a photography tour or photography road trip where you go to various locations.
Yeah.
Someone takes you to a good spot to take photos, and you take photos. After that, you might go out and have a meal together and go home to sleep somewhere at a motel somewhere. Now, you can imagine doing night photography. That is a very, very difficult thing to accomplish, because all the daytime stuff is maybe traveling, maybe a bit of scouting, but then you've got to go and wait for the night to come, and then you've got to go out and get home late and start again the next day. It's a lot more difficult logistically to do that. So that's why I don't typically go down that route to do it that way.
So the workshops that you do run 2 days, 2 nights. How does it work? What happens? So I arrive. When would I arrive?
Yeah. Well, typically on those ones, people arrive late afternoon, about 4 o'clock on the first day. From there, they're usually all strangers. They don't know each other, so it's a pretty casual. Get to know each other, chat about things. One of the things that works really well is the fact that everyone's there for the same reason. So even though they're complete strangers at the beginning, it doesn't take long for them to start to establish connecting points, because we're all talking about the same things. We're all coming from similar backgrounds, even though similar but different. And the other thing that I try and emphasize with these things is that we learn from each other. So sitting down with 5 other people, they've all got information and experiences that they know that the rest of us might not have had. And so these are all learning experiences. And particularly, say, for example, you go to a workshop and 2 people have the same camera. Now, they can help each other with settings or something like that. You can imagine what it's like trying to find settings on all the different camera brands out in the field. It's a nightmare. Some cameras are really difficult to find settings in camera menus, especially when you're not familiar with that particular brand. So, and that can slow everything down. So, things like that. And then we go out and, we usually have a meal first, then go out to shoot. That first night, I try to do a lot of introduction to, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and some of the specifics of the camera settings that we might want to use and things like that. For me, a big question in my workshops and in everything, the YouTube as well, is about not just so much about how to do something, but why we do it. Because I think with photography and a lot of other things, but let's just photography, there's a lot of stuff out there showing you settings. This is how you do it. But hang on, why are we doing that? And when people start asking the why question, the how to becomes more logical. Okay, we're doing that because of this. And Nightscape photography is a lot about compromise. We do this, and suddenly this suffers because of it. Things like shutter speeds, ISO, things like that. So we go like this. We've just killed our dynamic range. What are we going to do about that? So there's all this balancing act of compromise, and this is something you can't possibly go through in a 3 or 4 hour one night event. It just cannot happen. I struggle to fit it into 2 days and 2 nights, and I'm going flat out the whole time. So
people can only soak up so much.
Exactly,
especially if it's really new stuff to them, you can only take on.
True, and especially when you're sleep deprived and your head is bouncing with all this stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly it, and I think doing it over 2 nights is a really good way to basically get people together. It sounds like then the first night you would just be kind of doing it and getting into it and figuring it out, and then the next day gives everyone a chance to kind of analyze what happened and then attempt to improve on it or try something new or whatever. Is that how it seems to work?
Yeah, well, it's very hands-on. I'm with these types of workshops. It's very hands-on. In other words, I talk to these people all the time. We're talking together the whole time. I'm demonstrating in the field how to light things, showing what I use to do it. And we're basically, it's almost like they're not doing much except pressing the shutter at that stage. But I realized the reason for that is because if I said to everybody, okay, here's the torch, you go and do it. You imagine how long that would take to get a photo taken with every person having a go at this. It just isn't practical. So it's very much a hands-on. This is, and it's same with the editing. I do give them plenty of time to edit during the daytime. But I go through, I have a couple of screens set up and go through the whole editing process of the images we may have taken the night before, for example, just to give them a bit of a handle. I mean, that can be a nightmare. Honestly, a lot of people come along to the workshops that have never used Lightroom or never used Photoshop. And it's, you're starting from a real base level for some people. Other people are better than me at it. There's this wide range of skill levels. And then you might have, some people got Mac computers, some have got Windows. There's all sorts of other issues that you've got to deal with. But that's okay. That's what it's about. It's about, and that's why, to be honest with you, that's why I started the YouTube channel, to elaborate on a lot of these things in detail in each particular video. And so on my YouTube channel, there's a lot of stuff which is very much related to hands-on how-tos. And then there's a lot of stuff which is related to more just getting out and shooting, and hopefully a bit more inspirational sort of style, if that makes sense.
Yeah. When did you start that?
My first YouTube video was 2017, I think, started 2017.
Wow.
I mean, I've done plenty before that on YouTube. In fact, if you look hard enough, you'll find some old wedding videos on YouTube. So it's going back a fair while. But yeah, YouTube, that's when I really started Nightscape Images YouTube channel.
Yeah. And at that point, you were already teaching workshops?
Yeah.
Yes. So
it had been for a while.
What it sounds like you've been able to turn a passion into a business, and a lifestyle. At what point did you go from thinking I just love taking pictures at night of the night sky to wanting to teach other people how to do it? How did that happen?
It happened because I had a lot of people ask me about it. Initially, they said, "Well, I reckon you'd be good at doing this, and I'd like to know. I'd like to just tag along, or I'd like to be there." If I open myself up to people who want to tag along, I'd never have any time to myself. I can tell you that now. But that's how it started. And I remember thinking, so how am I going to do this? Because of the issues I mentioned before. You need time. You need venues to go to. You need somewhere. And so I went searching for a place that could host such an event. And where we went, Justin, where you came along, that was up at Elmore, which is about, half an hour, 45 minutes north of Bendigo in central Victoria. I only went there that once, because now I go to a place out near Tarnagulla, which is the other side of town, but still only about 40 minutes drive. So it's close for me to get to, which is a guest house. It's a farmhouse, which is actually a B&B. It's a guest house. That's what it's designed for. Nobody lives there. And it's old, but it is well maintained, but it's got all the stuff around to take photos of, and the space. And the other thing it's got is privacy. It's off the main road, so the only people there are the people who are staying in the house, if that makes sense. You might see the odd farmer drive past every now and then. So once I locked in a venue to do this, that's when it started in earnest, and I just started advertising. And I was always surprised when people said they wanted to come, thinking, okay, do they want to pay me to come to an event that I'm running? I always felt like, who would want to do that? And
lots of people.
It's really funny because the majority of people are looking for a safe place to go. And with the YouTube, and it wasn't designed this way, but the YouTube channel became the tool that sold the workshops. I didn't even hardly ever advertise them, hardly even mention them. But and I've worked out since all of this, the reason for that is that the YouTube channel gives them a chance to have a look at me and say, do I like this bloke? Do I want to spend 2 days with him? Has he got anything worthwhile to say? And they can assess me totally without having to come to anything. And oftentimes when we have these workshops, people arrive and I'll walk out the front to shake their hand and say, "G'day, I'm Richard." They say, "Oh, I know who you are. You know, I've been watching you for a couple of years." And I think, okay, so they're sussing you out. And so that's a good thing. I mean, I don't mind that. Some people would be a bit intimidated by that, but that's what it is. You know, I reckon if you put yourself on YouTube, then you need to open yourself up to all the good and bad that may come with that. And I've often said this about YouTube. It's more not so much about what you say, but about who you are. That's what people are looking at. They want to know. They don't really care what clothes you wear. They don't really care about what car you drive. They want to know, is this bloke trying to help me, or is he trying to get something out of me, or whatever it may be.
I think Doug touched on it earlier with how generous you are with tips and tutorials. You know, like you could hold back a lot of that stuff and say, you know, if you'd like to learn more about this topic, you know, come to one of my workshops or sign up to my thing or whatever.
Yeah.
And you don't see any of that in your content at all. Every video I've ever watched has its own complete set of information that doesn't require there's no, hey, for more info, go here or whatever, pay this. It's just its own full tutorial or technique video. And then by the end of it, you've learned something, and that's all there is.
There's no secrets.
There's no secrets.
Yeah. So. Well, it's a strategy that I decided upon a long time ago. Yeah, you got to understand, guys. I mean, at different stages in your life, you're at different places in your life. You know, I'm not trying to climb any ladders. I'm not trying to build something into something. I'm happy with where I'm at. And at this stage in my life, I mean, I've got grown-up kids. I've got grandkids now. You know, it's like you change your model of doing things. And I just want to be happy, comfortable and happy. And I enjoy the community that is built. I mean, YouTube's a community. And so I've got quite a few things. When, for example, when COVID hit, my workshops just went gone, nothing. It's like everybody else. You guys with weddings were the same. So I released all these videos and gave people an option, if they wanted to give me to pay via PayPal, and they could decide if they wanted to or not. And people did. And I wasn't twisting it. They still had the info, like the videos were all free. They were all on YouTube. And I found that's an interesting business model, and probably not one you'd learn in business school, I can tell you that. But I sort of had a basic, what's the word, faith in humanity. Now, not everyone has faith in humanity, but I know from the community of people on YouTube that there are really good people out there. And I also understood at the time as well that a lot of people didn't have any money to give anyone else to spend on anything. So that's why I went down that track. And I decided then, okay, this works both ways. Some people did pay for stuff. Other people probably didn't. And the thing is, I didn't even know if people didn't, what people were doing, because it wasn't as if they had to log in to actually, it was just on YouTube. It's all out there. But yeah, so great. It is a passion that has become a business, but I've drawn a very line between the whole business side of it and the enjoyment of what I do out of it. So that's why, like I said earlier, that's why I get away myself and do things.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, Richard, do you ever shoot solely for you and not to post or anything, you know, like just to sort of create something for yourself that maybe you don't even put out as an Instagram post or anything?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Jim, and one that anyone who's watching or listening to this that has a YouTube channel would understand the dilemma. You're always looking for content to create a video, right? So if I go out somewhere and I think to myself, okay, I'm going on a shoot here, do I take the video gear or not? And I can tell you right now, it's hard enough shooting stills out at nighttime. You try shooting video when you're out in the middle of nowhere in the dark, which is why I bought the Sony camera, by the way, which we'll probably get to, and create a video. That takes far more energy and time and effort than it does to shoot the stills. So your question is very relevant. Yeah. I went through a stage where I was producing a video a week for 2 years, and sometimes more than one a week. That's a big, heavy workload. When you're talking about it, I have to edit all the pictures and then edit all the video as well to create that video. And you also have to be careful not to burn out and not to just create filler content. It's got to be something that's actually relevant, because people vote with their, I was going to say they vote with their feet. They vote with their thumbs ups or thumbs downs, or they vote with their lack of viewing. If you produce something that people don't like. So the question is, for the last number of years, I haven't done much of what you said, just go out and shoot and not show anybody any of it, because it's probably something that I've needed to create content, and I've wanted to. Now, there is a balance there, though, because I enjoy creating content. So again, it comes back to that fine line of I'm creating the content, the video stuff and the images because I enjoy doing it. So I'm also enjoying sharing it with the world. That's something I enjoy doing. So if it gets to a stage where I'm starting to tear my hair out, not sleeping at night and having a hot sweat every time I go out to shoot somewhere, that's a problem. And then I would not do that. I wouldn't let myself go down there. So I don't do it very often, just shoot and no one would ever know. Because there's only a certain amount of days in the week, or days in the month, or weeks in a year where you can actually do this stuff.
Yeah, that's it. While we're talking YouTube, let's talk a little bit of YouTube. I want to make YouTube videos. I mean, this is a YouTube video, but this is different. This is a podcast. This is fun, easy. I want to make, and I've made YouTube videos for other people, and I've made some for my business, Lucky Straps, which are more informational videos. But we tried to make a video on our trip to Tasmania a month ago, and I found it really difficult to film things while also still enjoying what I'm doing. How did you, like, I've watched a lot of your videos, and you do a lot of shots, and you set them up and you drive, you back the car out of the driveway, and you must go and get your camera and put it in the car and then move on. And so how have you figured out ways to do that? Do you have a pattern? This question before from John, do you plan your videos with scripts and a shot list? And do you have any tips for storytelling? Or have you done enough video? Because you mentioned you've been creating videos for a long time, long before this YouTube channel. Have you got it all in your head where you can kind of just wing it, knowing what you're heading out to do? Does the story evolve each night that you go shooting, or do you have a story planned? Tell us about your process.
They're all good questions, and I'll try and keep it short. When I'm on location, there's no script, there's no real shot list. Shot listed. I go to a location with a concept in mind, because I know, okay, there's a tree over there I want to shoot. I want to get the something behind it or whatever. That's the shot in mind. But most of my videos, if you look at them, there's more than one shot involved. So when I'm there, I'll get a different something else. I might jump out and I might shoot at a different focal length or something. So these are some of the things that are going through my mind. The type of videos I do are very much run and gun. And you know what I'm talking about? That's exactly how I used to shoot weddings, run and gun. Everything's got to work easily and quickly. And you'd have to have a lot of reliance on your gear. For example, I use wireless mics, for example, so I'm not tethered to the camera. Those little wireless goes are incredible for this type of stuff, because they're small and compact. I always use autofocus, even at nighttime. I rarely use manual focus on any of my videos now. I used to shoot Panasonic video. But the autofocus on Panasonics is dreadful, even in daytime, let alone for video I'm talking about, let alone at nighttime. Because at nighttime in low light, every camera will struggle with autofocus.
For sure.
But the best one I found is the Sony A7S III, which is what I use, which is what I'm filming myself with right now. I've got a couple of lenses for that. The one I primarily use is the 24mm f1.4 G Master Sony lens. Fast aperture. But the concept of how I go about it. Now, for some of my videos where I have a topic I want to talk about not in the field, I will script, and I even sometimes use a teleprompter for that to just get the information out there very quickly. And if you ever use a teleprompter, that's an art form in itself, because you don't want people to think you're reading anything. So you have to work on presentation and the ability to tell a story rather than just information. You have to write a script that sounds like you're talking, not reading. That's one thing. But anything out in the field or away from home or any of that sort of stuff, I just wing it. And so having the gear that is quick, having tripods accessible, easy to grab out of the car. I do in the daytime for my daytime videos. I use a zoom lens. I'm not using the 24mm focal length, so I can get different B-roll shots that I might want to get. B-roll, as you alluded to before, is important to me, and that's important to me because I've always done that in all my videos. Doesn't matter what it is I'm trying to tell a story of. A B-roll connects jump cuts in videos, so you've got something to go over a break. I love using drone footage. No, I don't use them at night, but in the daytime, I like people to see where I am, and sometimes a drone's the only way to get a big picture view of where you actually are on location. This relates to one of the things that I've always talked about is the fact that photographers. There's two types of photographers: techo photographers and creative ones, right? And somewhere in the middle of that is where we should all be, have a bit of both. But some people are technically very, very good, very competent, but creatively they might struggle. And then you've got creative photographers. You hand them a camera, they'll throw it into semi-auto mode and get some brilliant photos. They just know how to see stuff. But technically, they might be challenged. Now, so drones, for example, another one of those technical challenges that you throw. Now, a lot of people wouldn't bother because who wants to muck around with a drone and fly that and try and get it to follow your car while you're driving down the road? All this stuff, I love that stuff. So that's my foot in the tech side of things. But on the other side, my creative side is I'll just let the camera focus on what it feels like is best to focus. So sometimes I'll drive down the road and I haven't realized at the time, but the camera's focused on the grass in the foreground and it's waving in the breeze. And I'll look at it later and say, oh, that's a nice creative shot. I didn't mean that to happen, but it just did. And I'll just let it do that. I spend a lot of time filming, and I'd probably do another video on that at some stage. But ultimately, it's about you. It's about you as the person and what's going through your mind. And you got to put yourself out there a bit. That's what I think anyway. You have to, you got to realize once you get yourself onto a public platform like YouTube, you got to open yourself up a bit, because if you don't, people won't connect with you. And I don't know, I'm this sort of middle to beyond middle-aged Aussie guy that not everyone's going to connect with me. So my target audience is not the under 40s, I can tell you that. And you can tell by the YouTube analytics who your target audience is.
But that's the best part about all of it is you'll find the people will gravitate towards you that it works for, and it's you can be yourself.
Exactly.
And people can see that. If you try and be someone else and try and appeal to someone to someone you think you should be appealing to, it's inauthentic and it doesn't work. So yeah, that's right. So I enjoy the interaction. I love the comments. You'll notice on my videos, and I only say this because it's a fact, I reply to every single comment, and there's thousands of them. Wow. If you look at all the videos. But it's one of the things I don't like about YouTube, and that is the lack of response you get from a lot of YouTubers. They haven't got time. And I think to myself, I don't think that way. I think the reason this is working for me is because of you people out there. So I've got to give you time. I just have to. That's what it's about. It's that connection that's really important to me. Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's you can tell because the numbers you get of comments on your videos, it's huge. The engagement is there. And that can be more important than just views, like just the actual, it's the same as anything, a social media platform or whatever, and you see someone with a heap of followers and you go on there and there's no comments on their pictures or whatever, and you think, are you really connecting with your following or so that's great. Very cool. All right, let's go to the junk food of this podcast. What gear are you using?
Junk food.
The junk food. This is what everyone's been waiting for.
Not again.
Yeah. What?
All right. Well, I'm a Nikon shooter. I always have been. Now just to go back in time, when I was doing video, like professional video stuff, right? I've used Canon, Panasonic, Sony. What else have I used? And I'm talking video cameras, not DSLRs, not mirrorless. Yep. So all of those, I've used all the different ones, you know, carrying around at weddings and events. And then when cameras became a bit more video friendly, I started ditching that. No, I've always still had Nikon cameras, but I used the Panasonic, the GH series cameras for many years doing videos because they're fantastic. The GH1, GH3, GH4, 5, 6 now. They're fantastic for video, but their autofocus is not great. So I was using the Panasonic cameras for video for quite a while. And I love the menu system in those cameras. So anyone who's a Panasonic shooter out there, I understand why you like those cameras. But I'm a Nikon shooter, so I've got 3 Nikon Z6s. This is one of them here. By the way, you'll notice it's got this little. You've seen these things where you can change orientation via a little thing. Silence corner there. Cool. It's a bit hard to see. I know.
What's that mounted? Is that mounted on the where?
That's a hot shoot. I've put a Manfrotto plate, but it's got an Arca Swiss slider.
No, the ring. Oh, the ring's just sitting around the lens.
It's mounted onto the camera body. Hang on, can you see that?
Yes.
It's mounted onto the camera. And the lens goes through the ring.
Yep.
So the lens is not mounted.
It's an Arca Swiss compatible tripod plate with a ring that the lens goes through, but doesn't touch. And
which means you don't need an L bracket to get a vertical
shot. Interesting.
Anyway, that's just one thing. It's just attached to this camera, so I thought I'd show you. It's a Kickstarter project that became available to everybody recently.
Okay, so it's not, people don't have to take the risk. It's actually available. You can just buy one online.
Yeah, you can just buy them. Yep. You can buy them now. It's a place called Silence Corner, and it's an Atoll, I think, ATOL is the brand of it. And they're different for every camera. So if you want one for a Canon, you got to get a Canon one because everything's a bit different. They do have a couple of little downsides. Like, for example, the lens release button is sort of half hidden underneath that ring.
Okay.
If you want to use it handheld, I wouldn't suggest doing it run and gun because your fingers don't fit in here properly. But for a tripod, it's made for tripod mounts.
Yeah. Landscape and night.
Landscape and whatever. Yeah. If you're on a tripod and you want to shoot, say, for example, you want to shoot panoramas, and you can go rather than hang off the side of a ball head or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a really quick way of getting that angle right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's a Nikon Z6 Mark II. This is a 20mm Nikon f1.8 lens. That's my go-to combination. Yep. Yeah, it's got a big lens hood. So you take that off, it doesn't look so big anymore.
But compared to the old, like the 20-1.8, the F mount, it's
compared to the old one. I was using the old one for a while on an adapter when these first came out, but this is a better lens. In fact, the Nikon Z lenses are all good. I haven't found a bad one yet. They're all fantastic. I've tried quite a lot of them. There's that one, and then I showed you this other one before. This is another Z6 Mark II with a 14-24 f2.8.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Z mount lens.
That's your time-lapse machine.
It's one of them, yeah. I've also got 35mm f1.8, a 50-1.8, and an 85 1.8, which I use all of those for different things.
Yep.
And then I've got another Z6, which is hydrogen alpha modified, which basically means they take out the standard filter that's over the sensor. So basically cameras have a filter. Let's put it this way. Light comes in the full spectrum of light into your camera. And in every camera, there's a filter that limits the amount of light that can be seen to what our human eye sees. So in other words, when you take a picture with the camera, it looks the same as what we're seeing. But there's a lot of other spectrums of light, like infrared and ultraviolet and all these other colors that we can't actually see. Now, hydrogen alpha is one of those towards the pink, magenta, red end of the spectrum, and there's heaps of that in the night sky. So in the Milky Way and the galaxies and everything, there's a lot of this what they call hydrogen alpha color. So you can get a modification done to cameras, which enables the spectrum to stretch a bit more into that color. Still got all the other stuff as well, but it goes more into that. Which, so if you ever see someone say this is a astro modded camera, that's probably what they're talking about. I've got one of those as well, which I use on a star tracker.
I was going to say, so is it more for when there'd be no foreground or anything in the shot, and you're going more for a closer up, deep?
Well, I use it. I do use it for a lot of. I'll show you some examples because I think that's the better way for me to explain without going into too many details. Share screen. Here we go.
Does it have any like downsides to other colors?
Yeah, it can do, and you have to be a bit mindful of white balance. So, for example, it shows a lot more red. So you push, or magenta. So you push more into the greens and you lower your white balance way back down. So, for example, I'm shooting that camera at about 3,300 Kelvin most of the time to get a reasonable white balance in camera. But then I tweak it later on anyway.
By the way, when you want me to pull that screen up, Richard, just yell out.
You can have a look now. I found a picture of my car. Can you see that?
Look at that.
There's the Subaru at Suicide Rock, which is up near Mount Hope.
Looks like a beast.
It does look like a beast, doesn't it?
It's
all about the angle.
Lit the interior there with a
it's got a light inside. Yep.
Yeah. Very well done.
So anyway, that's the car. But hang on, I'll find a couple of these pictures with the hydrogen alpha. Sorry, I don't mean to waste your time here.
Hey, you're not wasting anyone's time. Hey, we can fill some time in the chat. If anyone has any questions, pump them into the chat there. Grant's been mentioning a few things, but I'm going to wait. He's trying to decide on what camera system to buy at the moment as well. He's got a question for you.
So that picture there, for example, see this little tree. This is in the Flinders Ranges over here.
Hang on. I've lost your screen. I don't know if it's sharing. You might have to just hit share again.
Okay. These are the technical issues we have in live streaming, eh?
Live streaming. We need a back end engineer guy or something. Need somebody who runs the show for us.
Can you see that?
I'm bringing it up now.
You should be able to see a single image.
No, we've got your whole folder.
You got the whole folder. Okay. Well, I've got the single image. I don't know what screen that's on. You got the whole folder. All right.
So all right. Well,
can you see that?
No,
still on the folder.
On the folder.
Unless it's just a lag or something, because I've got a single image coming up. Anyway, don't worry about it. We won't waste everyone's time with that.
No, it's okay. I think it's just maybe it's sharing
somewhere else.
A different screen or something like that that's on your computer, or a different tab of the screen.
Well, it's the same screen, but anyway, it was.
You got to open the car photo. Yeah, I think you might have to open the photo first and then try and share that tab that the photo's in, rather than trying to share the tab from the folder.
Or you can just share your full screen.
Yeah, well, I thought I was doing that.
Yeah, so did I actually. Otherwise, we can try and pull it up on your Instagram.
All right, no, try. I think what Jim said might be the go. So have a look at that one now. Can you see that?
Yeah, that's a photo. Yep.
There we go.
Okay, so that image is taken with a hydrogen alpha modified camera, so you can see more of the pinks and magentas in that Milky Way. There's quite a lot of. If I zoom in, you can see all these various nebulosity around. There's a lot of that color in the sky. It's there. It's just that the standard camera doesn't pick it up as well. I mean, that's just one example.
It's so much more depth in there.
There's another one. Yeah, there's a lot of depth. All of these are shot with that. Yeah, there's a lot in there. And by the way, all of these images I'm showing you for the sky portion is just one single shot. There's no stacking. There's no.
I was about to ask that because a lot of the stuff that I see you post, it's super. They're stacked with it. You'll say it's 10 exposures on the sky with a tracker, and then 6 on the foreground, and that kind of thing. So what is? These look amazing. So what's the benefit of stacking everything? Is that something that I can't see the benefit through the magic of the internet and on social media because they're so small? But if you showed them to me in a big print or something, would I see the benefits of stacking then?
Yeah. So essentially, it's all to do with signal to noise ratio. So it's like this trade-off I said to you before. So if you have a high signal, well, let's go back a step. Every photograph you take has noise in it, every picture. But if you're shooting at base ISO in the daylight, the noise is way down here and the signal's way up here. So you can't see it. But if you start shooting higher ISOs, so as soon as you increase your ISO in a camera, you're lowering the dynamic range. That's just the nature of what it does. So, and if it's a dark image, your signal's very noisy to start with. So your signal's coming down, your noise is still here. And if your signal gets right down lower here, you get a really noisy, grainy image. It's not because it's really noisier than every other image. It's just you're seeing the noise. So by shooting more than one image, you're increasing the signal like this. You're bumping the signal up because the software that actually integrates all of those images into one image. Now I know that's why I said there's a lot of technical stuff involved in this. So essentially, your noise threshold is not going anywhere, but your signal's going up and up and up. And so let's say you've shot 10 images of the same thing and stacked them. And what the stacking software does is, firstly, it aligns all the stars up because the stars are moving, as you can imagine. So it aligns them up, and also it identifies what the noise looks like in an image, because software, being a smart, dare I use the term AI, it can see what noise is and it gets rid of it. So if you do it 10 times, let's say for example, then it removes the noise out of each of those 10 images to a degree, and so far the signal becomes very high and you get a much sharper, cleaner, clearer image. That's why you do stacking. You can do it with foregrounds too. In fact, you can do it in any image as long as the subject's not moving too much, because they've got to look, they've got to layer over the top of each other.
Yeah. So, Richard, I'm not super up to date with like stacking. So, is that essentially the same frame?
Yes.
And you'll shoot 10 of the same shot, and then
just go bang, 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 one after the other.
Yeah. Sorry, I've always thought it was like a panorama, and I was
no. That's a good question, because that is a form of stacking images, but they're different perspectives. That's moving across an image. You do get a little bit of the same concept though in a panorama, because you're overlapping images, but not to the extent of say 10 or 15 images stacking. So another thing that people get confused with is focus stacking, which a lot of people talk about in landscape photography. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a different thing. Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask about as well, because it's also something that you could do if you're trying to use a really wide open aperture f1.8 or something to let a lot of light in on your night sky, but then your foreground, you might need to stack some focus to get your foreground sharp. So is that something you do as well, or not really?
If I'm in a really dark sky location, there's no moonlight, no artificial light, and I want to shoot, say I want to shoot a mountain range, how do I can't light the mountain. So what do? I need a longer shutter speed. But if I have it too long, the stars begin to streak because they're moving through the sky. Remember, the Earth's rotating, that creates streaking stars. So what I tend to do is shoot a separate shot for the foreground as I do to the sky, 2 separate shots or more than 2, depending on what's required. And a lot of the images that I'm doing, most of them are not single shots. I mean, you can still shoot single shots and get great images, don't get me wrong. But if you want the highest possible quality images, the techniques that are available for us to use require you to shoot more than one frame. Now, a lot of the shots that you might shoot for a dark foreground, all you need is a longer shutter speed. You'd be absolutely amazed at what you can get out of, say, a 2-minute shutter speed. I'll show you some examples that explain what I'm talking about. Hopefully, I can get them.
We'll see if we can pull it up.
Well, here's one that's quite simple. I think a simple example is always the best.
If you just hit share, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, let me just press the buttons here. Yeah. There's a lot of buttons to press to get these things to share.
Oh yeah, it's a complicated software. It's high tech, this thing.
Yeah, that's okay. Can you see it? Can you see a railway line with night sky? Yeah. Okay, now this is shot at 50 millimeters, 50 mil focal length. And What that's done to the night sky has brought it really close in. It looks like you can just about reach out and touch it.
Yeah.
Now, the night sky shot is one single exposure. There's no stacking in this, but it is shot on a star tracker. Now, a star tracker is a device that you put on a tripod that you aim at either the south celestial pole or the north celestial pole, depending on which hemisphere you're in, and it follows the movement of the stars across the sky. It's just a little motor that rotates at exactly the same speed as the stars are moving. Now, that's putting it in simplification, but that's what it does. So that's a single 1 minute shutter speed, 60 seconds of the sky at ISO 1600 at f2.8, shot with a 50mm Nikon f1.8 lens. Okay, so it's shot at f2.8. Now, the foreground is, I think from memory, it's 90 seconds, I think, at f2.8 at ISO 3200. So it's still a high ISO, but it's a longer shutter speed. And what the longer shutter speed does is gains more signal. So remember the signal to noise ratio thing I'm talking about. The more signal you have, the cleaner and better image is. Now, what a lot of people do is take more than one of that foreground and stack them to get rid of all the noise. But what I did with this one, I used Topaz DeNoise to denoise the foreground. Now, and remember, this is 50mm. So when you zoom in on it, the foreground looks, well, hopefully you can see that. It looks...
Yeah, we can. It looks clean.
Pretty clean.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That is a single exposure foreground and that old silo and everything. Now, I want you to remember that the background is a separate exposure, which I've used Photoshop sky replacement to get in there, which is a whole new ball game in itself. If you ever use sky replacement, because a subject like this, for example, look at all these little
it's a lot.
You wonder how that works, and a bit of editing, but it does a really good job. So in this case, that is one single exposure for the sky.
Yeah.
And you see all these beautiful nebulosity colors that are in there. And that's only one shot. If I shot 10 and stacked them, you get even more detail because you got more signal.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to keep things reasonably simple these days. So that's a single exposure. So there's no stacking in this, but I did use a noise reduction. So as I showed you, that's just ambient light. There's no light there. It's as dark as anything. I couldn't see anything in front of me. That's just one shot. Now I'll show you another one.
Just quickly while you queue up another one, which we'll have to share it again.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? Like, what are your ethics? So that was that you took a night sky shot and you took that beautiful foreground shot. Can they be from different nights and completely different locations, and that night sky never rose above those silos?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? Do you have rules?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't want to do that because that's not real. What I did in that particular case, I shot them both at the same location, same night, same location, same lens, same camera, same everything. Yeah. But the problem with the world today is that it's really easy to do that. What you said, I can shoot a picture here in Bendigo where I live, and then I can go to the Kimberley over in Western Australia or somewhere and shoot a landscape and just chuck it on, and I can make it look real. If I wanted to, I could shoot something and face the complete opposite direction, and no one would know the difference because unless they've been there, they wouldn't know. So it's possible to do that. Absolutely, it is.
Because it's not something you. No, and obviously there's nothing wrong with it. If that's how you want to make your art, you can make your art like that. Yeah, but it's different to what you do in terms of capturing a night landscape.
Yeah, I think the key there is honesty. If you do that, you've got to tell people that you've done that. Look, put it this way: people are watching my YouTube videos, for example, and what they're looking at is this is what I'm doing. Now, if I suddenly come out and said, "Oh, that's all fake," imagine how people are going to feel. Yeah. Like, or if someone's got an AI generated foreground, which is happening all the time these days, I think to myself, "Hang on, that's not real. I just did that on the computer." So there's a lot of that going around now. This comes down to another question, which we probably won't have time to, but a lot of photographers, particularly landscape oriented, not so much people, although that's coming too, are more into graphic design than they are into photography. So they can blend anything with anything and make it look good. And I'm not saying that's wrong in an art sense, like you said, but if you're passing that off as realism, then that's a problem. And I can't do that. I wouldn't do that. Now, I do shoot my tracked skies from the same location, but I move in front of a tree or something, so I haven't got a tree to blend in or deal with later on. I can show you some more examples of that in a minute, but so I hope that sort of answers that question a bit.
It does. It's something that's always played on my mind, because personally for me, and I think it could just be laziness, I don't know. Personally for me, I want to take a photo, and I'm happy to do some editing in Lightroom or whatever, but that's it. I want to take a photo and that's it. Even maybe a panorama, I've done that before, but stacking's never something I've played with. And then when it comes to sort of, I don't know, anything beyond that, it's just not something that I really do. No. I don't have a drama with it, but I can see the technical benefits of tracking a sky and then putting it with it. If it's shot from the same position in the same shoot, that's just a more complicated way of doing what I do. It's just more technically involved. It's not actually a different. There's definitely a line there. And
like the storm photos when they've got, if someone shoots a storm but they've got 20 lightning bolts through it, and it's like that didn't happen. That happened over a 15-minute period.
That's right, but also that's its own thing, because if it all happened from that one spot where you were standing over a period of time, then it's a great way to show. It's almost like a time lapse. It's like, hey, all of this happened in this one location. That's kind of cool, but it's different. It's different to just capturing. One
real
lightning strike. Exactly. Well, it's not.
It needs to be explained.
I think it all comes down to if you're honest about what you're doing. So if someone's creating art that looks fantastic, let's just say, this is what I did. I created this. I got this shot here on that night. I went back another night somewhere else and got this. That's okay, because they're being honest about it, and they're good at what they do. And the average punter out there, the average person watching, looking at Instagram, they couldn't care less how you shot something. They just like a pretty picture. But it's more the people in the same industry that are thinking, oh, hang on, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or whatever. Now, I've got a picture here, if you want to share that one, Justin. This is a panorama down at Childers Cove, which is on the Great Ocean Road. Now,
amazing.
So this is not stacked or tracked, but it's a panorama, but it's two separate panoramas shot from exactly the same platform with the same camera, same lens, same night. But because it's so dark down there, I had to shoot the foreground at different shutter speeds to the sky. And that's what I did. I shot two separate panos and just blended them both together. And so there's a lot of detail that you can see in this foreground because I used a longer shutter speed. I couldn't possibly have gotten that with the same series of photos. I would have had to boost the shadows and exposure level in the foreground so much that it'd become a noisy mess. Because it just isn't enough signal. So it comes back to this concept of signal to noise ratio. It's as simple as that. And there you can see all these the sand and the rocks.
It's amazing.
It's all focused to infinity. But look at it. It's quite beautiful. The sky is standard.
How many images do you think roughly would you take for something like that?
I'm guessing it's about a 10-shot pano across the top and about another 10 across the bottom. If you've ever been to Childers Cove, it's a pretty big area. So just to give you an example, the 15-second shutter speeds in the sky and 60 or 90 second, I can't remember off the top of my head, for the foreground. So that's a lot more exposure time. And so when you shoot the pano of the foreground, the sky is blown out. It's really bright. So because the sky in this shot is brighter than the foreground.
Have you ever printed something like this? Just like, what's the biggest print you've ever made? The
panos are you can print real big because there's a lot of pixel dimensions. I've got this as a print probably about, I don't know, 1.5 meters wide, maybe a bit more wide. But see, I'm shooting. It's interesting you brought that up, Justin, because I'm shooting with a 24 megapixel camera. These Z6s are 24 megapixel. And I've never had any trouble printing big with 24 megapixel cameras, as long as you have pictures that are created well in the first place, if that makes sense, which is another reason why I do a lot of the techniques I'm talking about to get a nice, clean night image. It's not easy to get a clean night image. You guys know that. If you point your camera up to the night sky and the landscape and you think it's noise city sometimes, it doesn't matter what camera you use. They're all noisy if you push them hard enough.
Have you experimented with higher megapixel cameras like the Z7 to have more resolution, so that because with the current sort of Topaz DeNoise, like you mentioned, and Lightroom and things like that, is it possible that having more detail for those systems to play with, that you can end up with a cleaner image, despite the fact that usually a higher resolution sensor is going to have a noisier high ISO performance? Have you experimented at all?
Yes, absolutely. I think what you said spot on. I think that the let's say you got the Nikon Z7, Canon R5, Sony A7R, whatever. They're all high megapixel, or the A1 or the Z9. They're all high megapixel cameras, and they all do extremely well at nightscape photography, as long as you use them well, and that means getting an understanding of how to use the camera the way it should be used. They're really good. What I have found, some of the extra high megapixel or medium format cameras aren't great at this type of stuff, because they're just not designed to go. I had a guy come to a workshop who had a very high megapixel, very expensive camera that didn't go over ISO 800. It just didn't go anywhere. And it was just not really practical and usable. It's a landscape camera, or maybe a high-end studio portrait camera, but apart from that, it wasn't useful. But the Z7 II or the R5, all of those high megapixel cameras are fantastic. Now, natively, the lower megapixel cameras are better, like the Z6 or the R6 in the Canon, or the Sony A7 III and IV. This is a little bit lower megapixels. And the A7S III, which is the 12 megapixel camera that I use for video, you can see how much better that is in low light than all of the others. It's only 12 megapixels. So it's got huge photo sites on the sensor, which just works. I shoot my videos regularly at ISO 64,000 at night time. I'm talking live video here. And it'll go up to ISO 400,000, which is ridiculous.
That's insane.
But the different sensors operate differently. So I don't know if you want to get into that, but there's ISO invariant sensors, which all of the Sonys and Sony and Nikon cameras have been for years, primarily because Nikon generally use Sony sensors in their cameras, and ISO invariance means that you can shoot at a lower ISO and just simply boost it in Lightroom or Photoshop and get the same result as pushing the ISO up in camera. Now, typically up until the current crop of Canon cameras, you don't want to do that because you get terrible purple fringing. But with beyond the EOS R that came out, and then consequently the R5 and the R6, I think the R5 is pretty much totally ISO invariant. And the R6
it seems like it,
which is the newest of the smaller megapixel, is as well. And I know a lot of people who are shooting both the R6 and the R5 Canon for nightscape photography. But the Sony cameras, they've always had brilliant sensors. That's that's been their claim to fame for years. Just comparing all of those cameras, some people would probably want to know. I don't own any Canon cameras, but I've used a lot of them. And there's a lot of things I like about Canon, but I'm talking about for nightscapes here. So we could have the discussion about autofocus till the cows come home. And I can tell you now that the Nikon lags behind in autofocus, except for the Z9, depending on what you're shooting. But if you're doing what I'm doing, I've got the manual focus on the whole time. It brings the field right up. There's no difference. I love the ergonomics of the Nikon. I like the ergonomics of the Canon. Sony less so, because everything's smaller, and except for their very newest models, their menu structure is crazy, but you do get used to it. I much
I've
prefer
heard
the
that.
menu structure in the Nikon to the Sony. I've got the A7S III, which has got their new menu system, and it still drives me nuts. I was looking for how to format the SD card the other day because I hadn't done it for ages. I was like, where is that again? It should be right there,
Yeah,
shouldn't it?
that should be an easy one.
And maybe I'm just dumb. And I know a lot of people watching this will probably be Sony shooters thinking, you're just stupid. That's really easy. But it's like anything. If you use that one brand, you get used to it.
Yeah,
but
you can get around that, yeah.
Most people, I can tell you this from my experience, most people who shoot with a branded camera have never shot with the other brand. So it's really hard for them to compare. And until you start comparing, and I've seen every camera brand you could imagine, and I've seen the strengths and weaknesses of both brand or all brands in the field. So, for example, Olympus have the most ridiculous menu system I've ever seen because it's just so complicated. But that's not to say they're not a good camera. I'm not saying that. But if you're coming from a Canon or a Nikon, you'll look at it and say, what do they call long exposure noise reduction? It's certainly not that. It's something else. You know what I mean? You just can't find the menus, and they've got way too many menus. And Sony were guilty of that as well. Too many sub menus under this and under that. You can't find things. Now, but like I said, if you use that brand, you know that brand, and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
So all of the cameras, but I would suggest now. See, I came from the DSLRs like everyone else. The D750, D610. Before that, I've seen plenty of D800s, D810s, D850s. They're all brilliant cameras for this type of photography. The Canon 5D Mark II was the earlier one, 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV, 6D Mark I, 6D Mark II. They're all very good. In fact, the Canon 6D was probably one of the most favorite cameras for nightscape photography out there. But I'll tell you right now, never, ever underexpose one of those, because you will be in a world of pain with purple fringing. They are not ISO invariant sensors. So, but they're a good camera.
The shadows are what you get. Like what you've shot, that is just leave them there.
Exactly, which is where some of the light painting techniques and that come in. It saves you from having to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But and the D750 for an older model camera, I thought it was just such a good camera for so many things. I used it for years for this as a small, light, cheap camera, because it is a prosumer camera, but it's it hasn't got the bells and whistles of a D850, but it's half the weight, and it's just for this type of photography, fantastic.
If you're a beginner with a low budget wanting to get into nightscapes, if you picked up a used D750 and that Nikon 20mm 1.8, the previous lens, you're off to the races. You could go out with that and have a great time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you're talking about that, because the camera body is a big part of it, but the lens that you put on that is the big deal. Now, the majority of people would think that the 20mm is a little bit too narrow for nightscape photography. A lot of people will have that opinion, so they'll go for a 14mm or a 15mm. So a really popular lens a lot of people bought was a Samyang 14mm f2.8. They're made for just about every lens mount you can imagine.
I had one.
I had
I've got it.
But I never really had a good one. And the problem with Samyang is their quality control. Now, if you get a good one, it is fantastic. If you got a bad one, it's like you just want to throw the thing through the tip every time you get it out. So you're paying for, you're not paying much money for that lens. So you can afford to be a little bit. And the majority of people would go to a better lens, like even a Sigma or a Tamron, a pretty good quality these days, and especially in the Sony E mount, they've got Sigma have got some absolutely amazing lenses for particularly Sony mount. The Sony E mount's been around longer than the Z mount or the RF mount in the Canon. So there's and Canon, as you would know, Justin, Canon don't like giving away their lens mount to anybody.
It's killing me.
So there's no one else but Canon who you can buy genuine RF lens mounts for. You might get the odd lens like a Samyang or a Viltrox or something that's slammed on an adapter. On it looks like it's an old mount with an adapter, but
There's also manual focus stuff. So there's manual focus stuff that's been designed for modern mirrorless that they've adapted to RF or whatever. Like you can buy. I've got a fisheye that suits RF, and it's not an adapted EF1 like with a built-in kind of adapter flange. It suits Z series and that stuff, and they just have a different version for each. But it's fully manual, doesn't connect to the camera in any way. Camera doesn't know what lens is mounted to it, and that's about all you can get at the moment for RF. That's not native. Is essentially a manual lens that the camera doesn't know what aperture you're shooting at. Nothing. Doesn't have, because those old Samyangs on a Nikon, I think they had electronic contact, so it actually knew what lens was on it at least, or something like that.
Just can't focus. Yeah. You can change everything else. You just can't focus.
Can't focus.
Yeah.
So,
but the later ones they did make autofocus ones as well.
Yeah. And they made a couple of autofocus ones for the RF system until Canon told them to stop. Yeah.
True. Yeah. So it's all good. But as far as beginners, it's a difficult question because most beginners want their camera to do everything. If you're saying you just want your system to take nightscape photography, then I'm very specific about what to buy. But if you said I wanted to do that, but I also want to go and shoot the kids playing in the park and I want to go and do this, it changes the parameters somewhat. But I will say this, that all of the new cameras are very good. They're good all-rounders, all of them. And people criticize, for example, Nikon's autofocus, but it's far better than any DSLRs that are on the market, as far as eye focus and all these other things. And they're all good. The new Sony cameras, Sony are basically innovators. They're usually the first to the market with something because they're an electronics company at heart. So they took over Minolta cameras way back. That's how they got into the camera industry, and they've always made film and video cameras. Whereas Canon make photocopies, for goodness sake, but you know what I mean. Nikon is primarily an optical and a camera manufacturer. That's all they do, and they're not usually first to the market with anything. And you're seeing that now. So Canon is the biggest market share camera company in the world, so they can afford to sit back and wait a little bit. They wait and see what Sony does, and then try and do it better. And so you find this leapfrogging, and this is why it's hard to make a decision about what camera to buy, because suddenly Sony's done this, but then Canon's done this, and hang on, the Nikon Z9 came out. Well, gee, that's pretty good, and it just goes from one thing to the next. It's really difficult. I know a lot of people that bought the Canon R5 because it's just an all-rounder. It does everything really well. If you want to shoot weddings, I'll use that. If I want to shoot nightscapes, I can do that. If I want to shoot sport, it'll do that. Yeah. Now, there's not many cameras that do everything really, really well. The Sonys are great too. Don't get me wrong. There's a few things I don't like about certain cameras, like for example, the Nikon screen on the back only goes up and down.
Oh yeah,
I can't make it flip. So if I'm shooting in this orientation, I got my camera right down low to the ground. It's hard to see that screen.
Have you seen the screen on the A7 R5?
Yeah, that flips out both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like tilty and flippy.
Yeah, and you know what? They stole that from Panasonic because they've had it for years.
Yeah, that's been a long time.
Nothing's new under the sun.
No.
I don't have a problem with a totally articulating screen like the Canons have.
Yeah,
but some people don't like, for photos, they don't like that. They prefer it to be behind.
Even for video too, it's a little bit annoying. Sometimes I just want to tilt it, and you've got to flip it out to the side. And then spin it around just to get a little bit of tilt. So that A7 R5 tilty flippy is why I keep looking at Sony's. That and just small prime lenses. I really don't care about changing my camera bodies other than I don't. They both perform well because I got the R3 and the R5. The R3 is a beast that shoots. I shoot with that all the time. I actually don't shoot with the R5 much anymore. But I'm going to be doing more traveling and stuff like that. And a Sony with those lighter weight primes that are still super high quality, because the only lightweight primes you've got in the Canon system are their very, very basic prime lenses. So
well, I showed you this lens briefly before. This is a Sony 20mm f1.8.
Yep.
Now, if you compare it to the Nikon one, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit smaller.
Is it lighter?
But, yeah, it's a lot lighter. But this has got a Megadapt Nikon Z mount adapter. Now, if I put that on that Z body, it does everything, autofocus included.
Oh, okay.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's the adapter's made in China. Okay, so give or take quality control.
Yeah, maybe not the autofocus, really well. the performance of the autofocus.
I've done a lot of time lapses and single shots at night with this, and it is fantastic. I can't fault it. There's no vignetting. There's no issues around the corners of the frame. Nothing.
Okay.
Which is why I got it in the first place. So that does open up the Sony lens range to Nikon Z mount, for example. But I don't think you'll get one for Canon because Canon don't like people taking their lens mount.
No. So
yeah.
If you were starting from scratch today, or say I was starting from scratch today, with no camera gear and a big budget, which system would you pick? Would you stick with Nikon because you know it so well?
Well, I think the easy answer is it doesn't matter because they're all good. But I'll tell you one thing: Canon don't have a 20mm prime lens in their range. Okay, and that is my favourite focal length. From what they've got, the RF15 to 35 f2.8, which is a great lens, but they don't have any fast primes in the wide opens. They've got a 16mm f2.8, which looks like a toy. It's about this big, which it works okay, by the way, but it's tiny. In fact, someone at one of my workshops had one the other day, and I thought, what is that? It's this tiny little thing. And they were getting some really good images out of it.
And you can actually, we've showed this on the podcast too. So it's got baked in image corrections, but if you grab the RAW and pull it into Lightroom and dial back the distortion compensation, it's much wider than 16 too. It's actually much wider.
Yeah, okay. So it's interesting you say that because the 20mm Sony and the 20mm Nikon are both a bit different. I can't remember which one's, one of them's a bit wider than the other. So
which you'd notice because if you're swapping on a tripod side by side, it's
you can see it side by side. So if money is no option, then you start to think more about usability, ergonomics, what's available. For example, I'll give you another example: time lapse. The Z mount is just brilliant for time lapse. I'm talking Astro night time lapse because it's got built-in exposure smoothing. You can adjust the intervalometer to do all sorts of things which Canon still don't do. I don't think even in the top models the way that they do. Now, Sony have also got some pretty good time lapse, and Panasonic again is leading the field in this area. It's another area because Panasonic is another company. It's a bit like Sony. They're very smart. They make a lot of different electronic gadgets, and they're very smart. But not many people talk about Panasonic in the conversation of cameras these days. Anyway, so I don't want to confuse anyone, but if you're primarily a time-lapse shooter, I'd definitely go Z mount, followed by Sony, whatever, and then Canon. But none of them are bad. But that's what I would go in that order. But if I was primarily a single shot shooter, then you start to think, well, what else do I want? If I want a 20mm lens, Canon don't make one. What do I do there? I have to use a zoom lens to cover that focal range. Then I'd be looking at the other two. So, these are the sort of questions that you start asking. And then there's ergonomics of how does it feel? I mean, if you ask anyone about a camera, they will say, pick it up, hold it. How does it feel in your hand? I mean, that's the obvious thing you got to say to people. If you like the grip, if you don't like the grip, you'll soon find out. And that's one of the things I did not like originally about the Sonys. They were just too small and compact. Which on the other hand was their selling point. They're small. So
I think they have gotten better though with larger buttons and bit deeper grips and stuff like that. So they've worked on it. Obviously they got a lot of feedback, but I need to spend some time with one, I think.
Yeah, I think you do. But they're great cameras. They're full of stuff. The Sony, the A7 IV is a great all-round budget camera. I don't know if it's actually that cheap, but it is a really good because it's, I think, 33 megapixels or something. So it's not exactly it does everything quite well. And then, of course, you can jump up to the A7R5. Well, one of the other things I don't like about most of the Sony cameras, except maybe the very latest, is the screens. Small screen, small resolution. Don't like it. I much prefer the bigger screen. Now, Canon, this is where Canon might shoot ahead, but the Nikon screens are pretty good. They're 3.2-inch screen. Some of the Sonys are only 3-inch screens. These might seem like little things, but they all add up to a user experience.
Well, it's like you say too, they're all so good. It ends up coming down to these little things as to why you might choose something.
Exactly.
Because in general, you could someone could hand you any of them and you'll get the job done if you need to.
That's right. I'll tell you one thing. If you're shooting video, particularly video, but even stills, on a bright sunny day and you take your camera out and you can't see the back screen, that is a major minus. And my Sony A7S III, which is made as a video camera, I have to have that screen on bright all the time, 100%, because I can't see the screen in the daytime.
Yeah.
And then because it's on bright thing, it uses more battery power. And secondly, I think at nighttime often I'm looking at the screen and say, am I too bright? Am I overexposed? Am I blowing out? Because I can't really tell. Now that when I bought it was $5,700 camera.
Wow.
12 megapixels.
Well, they just brought out a cheaper camera with that sensor in it, the ZV E1 for video content creators. That's interesting.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
very interesting.
There's a lot of, but it's like I said before. Everyone starts leapfrogging. Even the same brands leapfrogging their previous models. They're all good. It's just the thing. Now our mate John Rutter, who's on the chat here, John's a Sony shooter. Questions.
Oh yeah.
So John shoots with the primarily A7R2, I think, which is a few years old now. But you got to remember that for people who shoot nightscape photography, they're not shooting autofocus stuff. The autofocus is less relevant. Other things do become relevant. And if you talk to John, he'd talk to you about battery life as a major problem with that camera. So Sony's used to have really terrible battery life. That was another factor. And you would know going from DSLR to mirrorless, the change in battery life is a thing.
Yeah. It is a thing.
Because mirrorless cameras use more power. So these are all considerations. So the fact that with this Mark II version of these Nikon cameras, for example, you can power them by USB while shooting, fantastic. So you can keep them going all night without just on a half flat battery. Doesn't matter. Which you can do with the Canon and the Sony as well.
Okay.
I'm probably not helping anyone by all this conversation because I see Grant's asked the question, Sony or Canon, what would you choose? So I'm hoping that what we just talked about confuses him even more.
Hopefully.
But I'm trying to get him to get a Nikon.
It really is. It really is a big part of it. Like you say, they leapfrog each other. The bodies change so regularly. You've really got to think about which lens system you're buying into, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, if you pick Canon because the R5 is good, well, next week the Nikon Z8 comes out and then it's better. And then you feel sad because you don't have the best camera. It's going to happen 2 or 3 times in between each camera model. Another brand's going to have a better one and you just have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's right. And so the Canon... for example, telephoto lenses. Sony have a very comprehensive range of telephotos, like they've got the 200 to 600, 100 to 400, things like that, which have been around for years, have been well tried and tested. Now, the Canon telephoto lenses are excellent. The 100 to 500, a lot of people bought that lens for birding and for sport. Now, this is where Nikon's left behind because they still haven't released the 200 to 600, which is on their lens roadmap. But the 100 to 400 is brilliant. The 400 millimeter prime lenses, all their primes are brilliant. All of them. If you've got a spare 10 or 15 grand, you can buy a 500 mil f4 or something. But not many people want a lens like that. So
it's not very usable for most people.
It's almost like they've released some crop stuff and stuff, but they've gone pretty hard trying to build out their pro line, I'm guessing, so that when the Z9 come out, they did have some of those crazy 500 mil lenses to really kind of grab the attention of the pro users and bring them
and the
across.
Olympics and things like that. But these prime lenses I'm using, the 20 mil 35-50, they're all very budget priced lenses. but they are phenomenal performers for reasonably cheap native Z mount lenses. So I don't think Nikon has yet made total advantage of that big lens mount that they've created.
No.
They're not doing anything with that yet. What they're going to do, I have no idea.
Other than the 58mm knocked.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not really useful either because it's
practical.
Manual focus. No.
No.
I'm mindful of time, Richard. Just yell out if you've got to go. You just let me know. But I want to get to a couple
questions.
You're okay. Yeah, a few questions, and then I did want to talk about time lapses too. There's a million things, so many things.
Okay.
But
Sorry, I talk too much.
No, I love it. It's great. It's been awesome. John Rudder, a little while ago in the comments said, you've been involved in this niche since the early days. Over the years, what is the biggest change and what are your thoughts on the direction Nightscapes are heading with the deep space style editing?
Yeah, that's it. Now, John, John is a very good editor. So he's coming from somewhere of good experience in this field. Now, I guess I worry a little bit about the influence that. I think there's going to be a divide between people who have the raw talent to capture images, and the people who have the learned and the intuitive talent to edit images, and that's using all variety of software and AI and all that other stuff that is currently available. So there's going to be a divide there, and I think particularly those who've been doing this for a while will be pretty much stuck in the prior camp where they think a real photo is just going out there and it becomes the experience and coming back. And then the people who are using more advanced editing techniques to get images, and predominantly they'll be younger people because they're always on the cutting edge of whatever's new. For me personally, I think there's nothing wrong with software. Software in of itself is not a good, bad, or otherwise. It's just something. It's a tool to use. So I think it comes down to how we best use it. I think some of the deeps, what John's talking about, there's a lot of images out there that there's no way knowing you'll go out and get a shot that looks like that in a single click. In fact, you go out and take 10 shots and stack them, you still won't get that look. So they're highly edited, edited. It's a bit like going to the Hubble Space Telescope or the James Webb, it's a new one, and throwing that behind a tree in a paddock. You know, that's the extreme of that. Yeah. That's not real. It's
you see those. You see those supermoon photos every now and then that pop up, and you're like, yeah, no. You know, like you can get compression and make the moon look big, but you can't do that with a sharp foreground and
no, it's impossible.
Like and the balance of light of a city and the moon and all that sort of stuff. And you just know it's just digital art, which is fine.
That's right.
Yeah, it's definitely okay. It has a spot.
Yeah, but it's different.
Yeah. So I've seen, and I guess getting back to John's question, I have seen a change. There's not many people around these days. You mentioned before, Justin, you'd be happy just to go out and try and get a single shot of something. There's not many people who are like that now. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of people who just want to do that, but predominantly, if you go to Facebook and Instagram, that's not what you're seeing. You're seeing very highly manipulated and edited images. So there is a trend, and that's caused by the fact that, one, we've got cameras that are really, really good now. Two, we've got software that is really, really good now. And three, we've got people who have been doing it for a while and are coming. It's a very popular genre of photography now. So all of those combined means you can easily get stuck in the dark ages and say, nah, I'll never do that. You know, that's the attitude a lot of people have in life about a lot of things. But I do worry a slight bit. So in answer to John's question, I sort of wish things were a little bit like they were about 4 or 5 years ago. But maybe I'm just showing my age. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm going to suggest a potentially a fourth reason for the shift, and that might be that the viewing distance for 99 or the viewing size of 99.9% of all these images is like this.
Yeah,
you know.
True.
And you've got a second or two to catch someone's attention, and these hyper-edited photos do that.
Yes, they do.
So rather than it looking kind of more real, you've if you want to get the likes and go viral, your image has got to make people go wow, and just everyday people that are scrolling through their feed, you've got to catch their attention with something that they haven't sort of seen before.
Yeah, so that's true.
Maybe that's pushing the sort of the hyper edit.
I agree. And I think just a small addition to that is if you blow that up into a big size, you can see all the editing errors.
Yes.
Or stitching errors, or perhaps blending errors and things like that. And a lot of people don't print their pictures anymore. They're only ever on a screen. Yeah. So all accurate thoughts.
Yeah, interesting. Some other, a quick one from Julie. What program do you use to stack foreground images?
So I use
everything.
I use a program called Sequator, which is a Windows-only program. It's designed to stack the night sky, but it stacks foregrounds just exactly the same. If you're using a Mac, you would use a program called Starry Landscape Stacker. So Starry Landscape Stacker is not free. It costs about $60 Australian. Sequator, which is the Windows version, is free. The guys just made it for free. And they both work really well. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, well, that's easy. Joel's comment here was, have you ever tried capturing nightscapes with a phone? The Olympus menus are fine.
Yeah, I was thinking of Joel when I was talking about Olympus, because I know he's an Olympus man. Tongue in cheek, Joel. I saw your name there. No, I use a phone to make phone calls and texts, and occasionally take a picture of the kids running around.
Yeah,
I'm not a big phone nightscape person. There's a few that are, but not me.
Well, it's and you got to wonder how much is happening in the background with sort of the software kind of trying to figure it out and maybe make some of it up or whatever. Interesting one. I don't know if there is an answer to this, but Mark wants to know what third-party 20mm lens would you pair with the Canon EOS R if you were using the EF to RF adapter? I don't know. Did Canon have a 20mm native lens back then?
No, but there's a Sigma 20mm f1.4, which is one of the old original Art Series lenses. It fits Canon EF mount.
Yep.
Samyang make a 20mm f1.8, which is also a Canon EF mount.
Yep.
But that's it. Tokina make one as well, but I think it's a Sony E mount only.
Yeah.
I think.
Not a ton of options, but no. But you make it work. Or like you say, if you don't need that wide open aperture, use your zoom, set it to 20 and use it at 2.8.
The problem is finding a wider aperture, a more open aperture than f2.8, which is what you get with primes.
Yeah, exactly. What I might do, if you've got enough time, I might quickly just show a little bit of the time lapses that you make, so that we can maybe have a quick chat about some of the unique challenges of making time lapses at night, and even quickly some of the gear that you use. Let me just bring it up here. I don't know what's happened with Jim. His camera's obviously died.
He's on battery power.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously a reason not to buy Nikon is their webcam utility mustn't be very good. Right. So these, you posted this about a month ago. This is towards the back of one of your videos about creating time lapses, which this was beautiful. I thought this section warranted a video of itself. So I shot. Interestingly enough, I shot that with a Nikon Z6 camera with a Sony 20mm lens. So that first one that you showed was shot with a Sony lens. And that was with the
20mm. So I'm pretty close to the hay rake, and the focus is on the hay rake, deliberately throwing the background out of focus. So it's shot. Yeah. I think it's pretty much wide open at f1.8. It might have been about f2 or something, but I can't quite remember. But it's also a day to night time lapse. So it starts in twilight or semi daytime. So I used sometimes I use aperture priority, and sometimes I use program mode, believe it or not, in the Nikon. And some people, I know I can read people's minds through the internet. They're laughing already when they heard that.
I was like, what?
that is one of the reasons I love the Nikon Z series cameras. They work fantastically with the built-in time-lapse features. Now, this is edited, so I used raw photos to create it. It's not a movie straight out of camera, but you can also get movies straight out of camera. And the other thing I like is with the Mark II version of the Z6 and the Z7, you can get both at the same time. So it used to be you had to shoot one or the other. Now you can get both. So you can see there it's starting in just before blue hour, and the picture ramps from that. And this is all done internally in camera. So there's no, that's not a great example because it's a bit pixelated, but there's no flicker, which is typically what you would get when you start ramping exposures, especially when the camera's automatically ramping it.
Okay, so basically you've got the camera automatically choosing its exposure. But you've set an exposure compensation or something to... No,
I'll let the camera decide what metering it should do. It's all set to manual focus, for example. So the camera is in some cases it's deciding aperture, shutter speed and ISO, because I'm using auto ISO for this. The only way you can get a day to night transition is to use auto ISO. There's not enough ISO range in 100 or 200 or 400 to get the whole range. Yeah. So I'm starting at 100 in daytime, for example, and it might end up at about 32 or 4,000 or 6,400 ISO at the end. So you got to enable auto ISO unless you manually adjust it as you go through, which I didn't want to sit there for 3 hours manually adjusting the camera settings.
Wow. So, and that's where the exposure smoothing, I think you mentioned, comes into play.
Correct.
And that's a setting in the Nikon. Okay.
Yeah, it's just in the time lapse mode. It's a setting that's built into the camera.
Yeah. So how, if you did this straight out of camera, how reasonable would the result be if you made the movie straight out of camera?
Well, it wouldn't have this one would be difficult because there's so much transition in light.
Yes.
But I can actually show you one that is actually straight out of camera. Let me try and get it up, and I'll actually show you this because this is a great example of something that doesn't need editing at all. Straight out of camera, as long as you get your lighting right and you think. So I'll try and.
That's my style.
I'll try and share. Sorry, I'll try and share this. Hang on.
Good to have you back, Jim. I don't know where you're headed off to.
Yeah, I fixed the first problem and then my battery went flat. I thought it would.
We said that.
We said it would. So
yeah.
So you should have something there now, Justin. Yeah. Can you see this picture?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, see how it's moved. It's on a moving slider. This one, but the actual exposure and the stars and the foreground. If you look closer, you'll see bugs going up and down that plant. If you look really close, you'll see bugs on the flowers. Now, this is straight out of camera. Nikon Z6 Mark II with a 35 millimeter f1.8 Nikon lens.
That is stunning.
That's
focused onto that flower and no editing. Straight out of camera.
No editing.
No editing.
Okay. Tell me this. How long did it take to capture that? How many seconds was that?
It took about 3.5 hours to shoot. It's 35 mil at 10-second shutter speed, ISO 4000 from memory. And it's shot wide open at f1.8. So that's deliberately made the bokeh look. That's what I was after.
Yeah.
So I focused on that flower at the front there. Even some of the other flowers are out of focus, as you can see.
Yeah, it's shallow. Yeah, super shallow.
It's shallow, but that's what I was after. So this type of look is not commonly done in nightscape photography, but it sort of stems more from, portrait photography, really.
Yeah.
But the lighting is the key to it. So to get it's got low level lighting on the actual flowers. So two lights, one from the right, one from the left, just on the whole time, but on a very, very low level because you don't need much light on those settings.
No.
And that's just panning across. Got this tiny little device which just pans the camera across to get that shot.
So it's not sliding; it's just panning.
No, in this case, it's turning in circle. Yes, but I've got other ones where it actually does pan.
Slide.
Slide, sorry. But in this case, the reason this works, and I've done a bit of experimenting, the reason that works straight out of camera is because it's got that bokeh out of focus look. I could have edited this as well if I wanted to, and probably make that background more vibrant, because that's what it would do.
Yeah.
Because you got to realize that a in-camera time lapse is basically a whole heap of JPEGs pushed together, and the images that I'm shooting as raw files are not edited. They're raw. They're flat, and they need a bit of work. So sometimes I've shot images that are normal time lapses that aren't like that one, for example, and they don't look very good. They need editing. They need a lot more grunt as far as contrast and color and everything else. So they can look fantastic. Now, I'll quickly show you another one which is done the same way, and this is also. Hang on, sorry, I got to do my screen sharing business.
Yeah,
I'll get it back to the beginning.
It's a process.
It is a process, yeah.
While you're saying that, Alan Williams says, "Good afternoon, Richard and others." That's us two. We're the others.
Alan,
Hi, Alan. How are you?
Is he? Alan's a good bloke.
Is he?
He's a Canon shooter, so for you guys. So also Jimmy's a Holden Commodore driver, so that's a double strike for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, Alan, if you're listening. Now I want you to have a look at this. This is a time lapse. So have a look at this when I get it going. Can you see it?
Oh, hang on. Pot plants. Yep.
Pot plants. It's day to night time lapse. And I want you to have a look at the bugs on the ground.
I saw.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
And as it pans across to the right-hand side, I want you to have a look at the bugs in the grass on the right-hand side. Hopefully you can see them. The grass is literally
see the ones
with,
going up the plants.
Bugs. I'm looking at a full screen here. It probably helps.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can still see movement in the grass.
So that was a slider going across from one, but a day to night. So the camera's doing the exposuring, the metering. It's doing it itself using. I think I used aperture priority. So I set the camera to f2.8.
Yep.
I think it was f2.8. Focused on the foreground pots, and away it went. The background didn't do anything much. It was cloudy, and but it still shows you the concept of it.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other time lapses which are much more simple and basic, and there's no exposure smoothing. It's just the same settings all the way through.
Yeah. For your night, like if you're out under the stars already, and
all nighttime stuff. Yeah, but I like to add a bit of motion and movement in because it just makes it more dynamic. But some of them are just beautiful, just as is, without any extra movement at all. I don't know. You got any other?
Well, these. I mean, I'll bring this back up. But the movement, the movement, the foreground. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
And then having the windmill, and then you get a peek at the night sky just at the right time.
And the Aurora. At the start of that, you'll see a big red glow in the sky. That's an Aurora that was happening.
I'll bring it back.
And it was quite massive. It was big, but it was above the clouds, which was unfortunate.
I think Grant asked earlier, how do you find out if there's going to be an Aurora? Have you got an app for that? Or?
Yeah, there are apps. Have a look at the top right hand. You'll see a red glow. See that? That is Aurora. And I missed it because of the cloud. Well, I knew it was happening, but there was pretty heavy cloud cover at the time. So there's quite a few apps for Aurora forecasting. There's Aurora alerts. Let me just have a look on my phone here. There's one called, it's called Aurora Alerts. But most of these apps are designed for the Northern Hemisphere, and things are a little bit different there.
Yeah.
There's another one, though, that's a fairly new one called the Glendale app. And that is, hang on, let me try and get it up on my phone here. I don't know if I can actually show you. No, I can't. You can use it as a web page as well on a computer. And it shows you things from around the world. So it's got an Australian location. You can just say what's happening in Australia, basically. Okay. Glendale. No. It's one word, but it's like a person's name, Glendale.
Oh,
and that will tell you when auroras are happening. I'll tell you when there's a likelihood of something coming, but they are very random, hit and miss. So they're hard to predict.
Is this also, so this was on the same night, is this the Aurora as well that happens?
Yes,
in
it is.
Here?
And that's a rose bush, similar to the other one I showed you before. So the Aurora happens on the top right-hand side, but there's pretty heavy cloud cover. You can just see it poking through.
Mm.
Very
so,
cool.
Richard, something I noticed before on your little torch, looked like it had a little gel on the front of it.
I did, yes, very, very well picked up.
Do you shoot like all your lights? Do you gel them all?
Yeah, well, basically the reason I do that is because most torches and most lights in general, being LEDs, head to the blue side. So if you have a torch without any sort of filtering on it, then it has potential for being too blue in the shot. Yeah. And I always set my white balance in camera anyway, but I've always used a half CTO gel. So that's a proper photographic gel. I've just put tape on it to hold it on there. Yeah. These days you can buy lights like this, for example, little RGB. Can you see me or what can you see on the screen?
Yeah. I'll make you bigger.
RGB lights, which are color changeable. So you can change in the camera, a bit like those ones I've got in the background that are pink at the moment. There's all sorts of stuff out there now which helps with the whole concept of lighting. You don't have to just stick with a torch or a flashlight anymore. But I still use the torch, with this one, with that half CTA gel. It's been to the moon and back, that one. It's really done a lot of work for my light painting. This is like a paintbrush, and you use it just like that. But I do, because most torches are too blue. Yeah. Doesn't look blue to your eye, but when you see it on the picture, it looks too blue.
So then your white balance will be off for your sky, like what you're trying to achieve for your sky, and then foreground.
Potentially, yes. Yeah. So that's one of the problems with if you're lighting a scene, foreground and the background all in one shot, you need to try and get your color balances somewhere in the right area. Everyone likes different color skies. There's no one answer to the sky color. Yeah. Some people like it blue, some people like it a bit more yellow, but if you start adjusting white balance, it affects the whole image. And then you got to start using brushes and things in Lightroom to change portions of the side. More editing, you see. So I'm trying to make the editing process easier by gelling the torch. It's a bit the same as you would do by gelling a flash if you want a different look in portrait photography. It's exactly the same principle.
Yeah. Do you have a go-to white balance starting point for a Milky Way?
I used to be around 3,800 to 4,000 Kelvin. Now it's about 4,800 Kelvin. So my tastes have changed over the journey.
Interesting. A little more purple. A little more.
Well, a 4,800's got more yellow in it than 3,800. So basically, the lower the Kelvin number, the more blue your image is. So for example, daylight white balance is about 5,600 Kelvin, right? And so if you set your camera to daylight or 5,600 Kelvin, you'll get a much more yellow image overall than you will if you set it to, say, 3,200 or 3,800 or something, because that puts more blue into the image. And it just depends on your tastes change over time. And the obvious response to this is people will say, well, you can change your white balance in Lightroom, Photoshop, or Camera Raw, whatever. Of course you can. But I still think it's better to have an idea. Remember, I said before, it's about the why, not the how-to. If you understand what these numbers and things do, then it helps to formulate in your brain, oh, okay, so that's why that sky's too blue, because I'm setting my white balance there, for example. Yeah. But, the other thing I found is different camera brands, like Sony color's different to Canon, Nikon's different to Olympus. They're all different. You can set them all the same and they look different. Yeah. So there's no standard. It's the same thing with ISO. People can put an ISO 100 in their camera, but one other brand of ISO 100, the picture's brighter. There's no standard that says ISO 100 has to be exactly this.
And lenses can also affect both of those things. Can affect the same light that comes through at f2.8 on a different lens might be slightly different, and that might be a slightly different color too.
Exactly.
Tell me this. Do you use presets when you edit your photos in Lightroom?
Generally not. But having said that, I use pretty much the same edits for all my photos. Yep. So I suppose you could say I use a preset, but it's not one that I've got listed on the side of the thing. When I started doing a lot of this 10 years ago, I bought a whole heap of presets. Well, guess what? I never use them.
No. Well, I was actually just about to ask you if you sell those presets that you use on your website or something.
Well, I don't actually use them as a preset. I just adjust all the sliders, and probably the reason I do that is because I just like to see what each one is going to look like.
Yeah, you probably enjoy that process.
Yeah, and even now, after all these years, I still vary settings deliberately to see what it does. So, for example, sometimes I'll shoot my camera at ISO 800 and see, okay, can I push that right up to ISO 6400 and still get a decent picture? Because ISO invariance tells me I can. But sometimes, can I? Or I'll change it just for the sake of it, because you get a bit bored with the same old thing all the time. So that relates again to the the why rather than the how to. Yep. Once you understand the whys of this, you can adjust all sorts of things and still get a result. It's not a cookie cutter approach all the time.
Yep. Another Lightroom question. Lightroom AI DeNoise. Any good?
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, these days I don't do a lot of denoising on my night skies because I'm using other editing techniques, but it's fantastic for foregrounds. I use a various methods of not getting noisy skies. One is tracking, that helps a lot. Two is I just sometimes use the standard noise reduction in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, which is enough to get you out of the board. See, the more you edit pictures, the more noise you introduce again as you keep pushing and push and push them and stretch them and do stuff. The noise builds up again. So if for example, if you're in Photoshop using curves, adjustment layers and things like that, you can easily make an image noisier than when you started. So there's all sorts of things you can do. But I do like the new AI. It's very similar to, I did a bit of a test with Topaz DeNoise, which I've had for a while, and they're pretty similar results. The difference is that Topaz creates a TIFF file, and the Lightroom one creates a DNG file.
Yep.
I think it is.
Yeah, it is a DNG. Yeah, which is closer to raw format, but TIFFs have still got plenty of latitude for editing later on. Yeah. And they take about the same amount of time. Like, people complain about the time it takes. One thing though is the DNG file is quite large when you actually create it. Yeah.
Much bigger than the original picture you had. So if you're doing a stack or a time, well, I wouldn't use it for time lapse. It would just kill it. You'd never render a time lapse with that. But for anything with multi images, panoramas, for example, that could be a massive file size, which can be a problem.
Yep. Okay. That's good to know, because I've played with it a little bit, but I haven't had much of a chance to play with it on night sky photos yet. Another question I had is, what are your thoughts on photo competitions? Do you ever enter them? Have you ever entered a photo competition? This is an interesting question. The last time I can remember entering a photo competition, I won it, but it had nothing to do with night sky photos. It was a picture of my daughter getting an autograph from an AFL footballer, and I won the photo competition with that. Really?
Yeah, because it was to do with a random thing. I can't remember the topic. It wasn't anything technical. It wasn't anything. It was more about an emotion attached to the image. Yeah. So I guess that tells you the story. I don't enter competitions. No. I don't know. I just probably. I guess I'll tell you one thing about that is, I have this feeling about, if your profession or your business is photography, I don't sort of feel like it's not my place to be putting stuff into photo competitions. One, because if you lose, people think, oh, you're not that good anyway. That could be one option.
You probably wouldn't lose.
No, but you know what I mean. But having said that, there's a lot of really good photographers out there that are not. And this this is another topic I'm very strong on. This concept of pro photographers. Just because you make money out of photography doesn't make you necessarily good at that genre. It just means you're making money out of it. Now, some people are very good, and anyone can become a pro photographer if someone pays you money. And just because you do something a lot doesn't mean you're necessarily better than someone who doesn't do it as much as you do. It all comes down, there's a lot of factors in this. I judged a photo competition once. A camera club asked me, and I found it really difficult because I didn't want to not like any photo. Because I was trying to work out what they were trying to achieve with the photo. That was my basic premise. But the majority of photo judges don't think like that. They're thinking technically. They're thinking, compositionally and all these other things.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to judge a photo competition between me and Jim and Grant for our night sky photography and.
Oh yeah, I could do that. I could do that. I wouldn't want to get a bad rap out of it.
You'd be happy to tell Jim that his photo's not very good. You'd be cool with that.
No, I would always find something positive in the photo, no matter how bad it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Too nice.
Exactly. You got any
Richard,
questions, Jim?
Yeah. Are you selling prints? I know we kind of briefly, you said before, you sold a canvas to the farmer.
Yeah.
Like, do you have like a print store? Like, is that
something
where all your photos are going?
I have sold a lot of prints over the years, but it's not something I've really concentrated on as a thing. But printing's one of you know what it's like. Printing pictures is a lot of elements in it, and also one of the problems I have with Nightscape photography is that they're very dark images by default. And when you put them behind a frame of glass, you get a lot of glare. I've been doing some laminated, you can't see the laminate, but laminate prints that don't have glass, and they've been fantastic. I've got a heap of them in the room here, but you can't see them. I'm actually doing an exhibition at Dudley House in Bendigo in November of this year.
Oh, cool.
So I'll have a whole heap of my pictures in print form up on the walls there. And I do sell a few. I don't really market it very much. It's on my website. You can see pictures there, but so I don't really have a print house. I've done a lot over the years. I used to do markets, Moonlight Market down the street. Used to go there. I gave up on that because of my back. My back must be
loading everything in and out. Yeah.
Loading everything in and out of the car.
The time probably spent there is probably not worth the.
Well,
if you put that same time into an online store or something, you could probably
pretty good before Christmas when everyone's wanting to buy stuff. But,
yes.
Yeah.
Have you now I can't remember what I was going to say. I had a great question. It's gone. Well,
gone.
We are almost 3 hours in. It was really good. It was something I really wanted to know. I don't know. This has been a fun chat. There's probably a million things we could talk about. I want to ask you about video and all that stuff, but we might have to do a round 2 one day.
Oh, that's okay.
So many questions.
I don't know if anyone's still here watching us after all this time.
Yeah, there's still a few on.
Still a fair few here.
Yeah, the chat's gone quiet because everyone's listening so intently to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I've got 270 plus videos where I talk about all this stuff, so there's no shortage of it.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. So that time-lapse video that we saw a few clips from, like that's got, I don't know if it was in that one or the one after, but you go through the process of how you edit them, like the Lightroom plugin that you use to edit the raw images and all that sort of stuff. So it's like everything's there. Any little part that you want to dig into, if you want to do your first night sky time lapse, like all you have to do is go and find the video, and the whole process is laid out. Yeah,
and some of those, so you have to be careful on YouTube because sometimes you try and complicate things more than they need to be for some people. Some of it's quite simple, but you can never say this is easy because that's not fair, because some people don't see it as easy at all.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, some of the processes are quite simple and straightforward, and it's just a matter of trying to master those as much as is possible. So in fact, talking about YouTube, my latest video, which I just did this last weekend, has been performing really well. I'll just show you the picture. share screen. Sorry, I'm going through this.
Oh, that's all right. Either that, or I can bring it up on your actual channel, whatever's easier.
No, here it is. I've got it now.
I get it.
So you should be able to see this image on the screen.
Hang on.
So I did a video about this. So I shot this in the field. So the video live on location, shooting this old cart outside the shed. And that's got a single track sky behind the whole lot. Then I edited the whole thing. So it's a 28-minute video. It's quite long, but that's still rushing to get editing done in that time. But yeah, it's gone really well. But if you look at this image demonstrates how much clarity you can get by blending images together, multi-layering and things like that. Look at all the detail in that shed.
Yeah.
And this is all.
Has that had DeNoise used on those foreground images?
No, because I shot these at different settings. So I've stopped down the aperture and lowered the ISO. So they're very clean images to start with. And that's how come. And the other thing though, Justin, just in brief, this image is all shot at infinity focus, the whole lot. I didn't change the focus for anything in this image. So
what about the sky?
No, the sky is all infinity. Everything's infinity. So it's focused to infinity. So this is a big question. A lot of people ask about this concept of focus stacking. Now, if I start zooming in, the image starts to pixelate because it's only 24 megapixels, but you can see everything sharp.
Yes.
Yeah, that's crispy. It's super crispy.
And the stars are sharp as well?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the stars are always going to be sharp at infinity because that's where they are. But that's on a tracker. So I actually took the camera out here and shot that. So it's all on the video. But so the stars are sharp. If you go in, you'll see they're good. There's also a little bit less stars actually in that image. It's known as star minimization. It's quite a common technique that people use to make the nebulosity stand out more than just. So Julie has just put this, is hearing about the Star Exterminator program, which is what I used to shoot this, that sky part. But anyway, I shot that sky at f2.8 with a 20mm lens. So this is another question everyone asks me. Why don't I just shoot it at f1.8? So it's shot with a 20mm f1.8 lens. I stopped it down to f2.8. Why? Because it's sharper at f2.8 than it is at f1.8. It's as simple as that. Because I'm on a tracker, I can follow the stars. I'm not getting any star trails. It's a 1 minute shutter speed. No, sorry, 2 minute shutter speed on this one. I'm talking about the sky background layer here.
This is two separate photos, is that right?
It's more than two. It's about.
I'm not sorry.
There's about 30 images in this.
But sorry, two locations. So you've gone out the fence for the sky. Is that?
Yeah, it's the same location. I'm just on the other side of the fence, just here to shoot the sky, and I'm back here to shoot the. The reason I did that was because I wanted to blend that in behind all this, and I knew it would be a nightmare to try and get it behind this cart and the wire fence and everything else. Yep. But the background's one shot, and I shot about 30 images of the foreground. And if you look at that video, I can show you doing it. Every bit is lit as a separate item. All of these bits around here, that little trolley and everything, the grass, you name it. Now, that's overkill. I didn't even use 30 of those images, but I did it as much as anything as an education to show people how I do. I've got plenty of videos on this topic. But anyway, this video I only released last Saturday. It's going really well. I don't know, it's got about 8,000 views already, but
oh wow.
Which for me is pretty good.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I know if someone was, prancing around the bikini down the beach, they'd have 20,000 in the first minute. But
I was going to suggest maybe some thumbnails with your face looking like shocked, and then maybe a girl in a G-string in front of some of the farm implements also might,
Well, I can tell you now, if I did that, not my face, but if I put a G-string clad girl there, I would get mega amounts of views, which is one of the things I absolutely despise about social media.
It's crazy.
It really bugs me. It really does.
Yeah, it's all about getting the clicks on the thumbnail.
We won't go down that track.
Wait till you see the thumbnail I make for this episode.
Oh no!
Got Jim in a G-string.
Yeah, well, Jim might look all right, but I certainly wouldn't.
Funny.
I want to attract the female audience. All right, so just to give you an example, that's a lot of work to go to get an image like that. And I'm just showing you. I want to show people the extreme you can go to. I've done quite a few inside images in sheds and things, lighting using this method of just layering a whole heap of bit. In a nutshell, using layer masks in Photoshop and just using light and blend mode, and the whole thing just comes together.
Yeah. So are you just using so just layer mask and then just sort of trial and error. I'm lighting it in the field with a plan in mind, because it's really easy to forget what you've just done. But apart from that, I'm using layer mask on each layer, rubbing out bits I don't want and leaving bits I do want. Using the light and blend mode at nighttime, you've got a dark background for everything to sit on. So all the dark pixels disappear and the light pixels remain. So in other words, if I light this wheel on the back of the cart there, the rest of the image is black. So it's irrelevant. All I've got to get rid of is anything that's like my torch, for example, might be in the shot or something like that.
Yeah, something that was too bright, that was unwanted.
If it's over saturated or blown out or something, I'll get rid of it. But by stopping down the aperture, I increase my dynamic range again. I don't get blowouts. So I shot the foreground at f5.6 at ISO 500. So my dynamic range at ISO 500 is almost the same as ISO 100. So it's very good. The blacks look black and the whites look white, and it doesn't blow out as much.
Yeah. Richard, if you've gone through this in a video, that's okay. I can have a look at that later. But are you editing say like a quick batch edit on the foreground images and then blending them, or are you blending them and then you're going to edit, like put it back in Lightroom?
Yeah, good question. No, I do a batch edit in Lightroom.
Yeah, so you sort of get your greens how you want them and everything like that.
Yeah, I get it. If it's too dull, I'll just boost the exposure a bit or something like that, and then send them all off as layers, separate, open as layers in Photoshop.
Yeah,
and then they all just come together. Now, you got to remember, for a shot like this, the camera doesn't move, because if it moved, these don't line up properly. So it's all static. A static shot. So in theory, what you could do with a shot like this is put a person in there as well, but they don't have to be there for the whole time. They only have to be in one of the shots.
One frame. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, in theory, except what you can end up with people is ghost see-through people.
Yeah.
So you got to realize that for the light and blend mode to work, you need a black background. So for example, imagine if I had a person standing here leaning on that wheel, and they're not in all the other pictures, there's no black background of them. So they become semi-transparent. So what I do, if there's a person in the frame, I have to manually blend them in.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's so that's the way I know to do it.
Yeah. So you got to just use layer masks and blend them in, which I have done, but I don't do it very often because that's more work.
Yeah. Okay.
And a person can't stand there for the whole time I'm taking all those pictures. That's not practical. People don't stand still.
No,
as you guys know.
Yeah.
We know. It was actually we might have to save it for another episode, but that was actually a topic I wanted to get to, which was putting people in night sky shots, because that's something that we've both done at weddings, and I've even attempted to do it with dirt bike riders. So it's a whole fun topic in itself.
Oh yeah, that would be very hard to do with a dirt bike rider.
Oh, Justin, I feel like you need to show Richard that shot, because I feel like he'd be proud. I feel like he'd be proud of you.
I think you saw it. It was a long time ago, because I do remember.
I think I did see one actually. You used flash. You flashed.
Yes, it was with flash.
Well, it's the only way you do it.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. We can finish the show on that.
So are there any more questions while we're thinking about all that?
Well, there was a few comments. Jim might be able to bring them up.
Yeah. So I think we got through Julie. But
great Kenneth chat comments.
Said, thanks for the talk. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Kenneth. Thank you, Kenneth. Good to see you.
Joel, this has been far more interesting than my day job.
I hope you're not on the boss's time there, Joel.
Yeah. And Julie, I was interested to hear about the star. I think we did that.
Oh yeah. We talked about that a little bit. Julie, I've got lots more talk about that on videos, which she probably already knows that.
So I think we've got through most of it. Grant isn't going back to Nikon because I've had tech issues apparently.
Yeah, well.
Oh really? That's good.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've only got this on on
Instagram.
Instagram easily. Otherwise, I'll have to dig into Lightroom and find it somewhere. Yeah, but this was the first one we did. So that was the rider coming around a berm, pitch black. So it's single frame.
Yep.
With, I can't remember. It probably was with the 20mm lens, I'd imagine. Yeah, 50 with 20mm 1.8. Yeah, that's right there. And just one flash just to freeze him. But obviously, so the consideration with when I was trying to figure out how to do these shots was trying to make sure he would be okay because it had to be pitch black. Yeah. But he's an extremely good rider, and also making sure that he's framed with a dark background, not the night sky. So and making sure all the ambient light was off, so everyone's phones and everything, because there's a little group that started crowding around, and then I had to make sure everyone didn't turn their phone screen on halfway through the exposure or whatever. And then this, that's the wrong way. This was the escalation of what happened after this one worked. We were like, all right, that worked. Let's go further. And he hit this jump.
Wow.
And so making sure he didn't jump out of the trees was tricky, because then you get ghosting through from the night sky. And also, so this light that's coming from there, we had to put an LED light near the up ramp so he could see
what he was doing.
What he was doing. Even still, it was so dark. I don't know how he did it. And then, we had to put another LED light way down where he was about to land, just so he had a rough guide for where the ground was. And we had it pointing away from the camera, and it worked out. Took 3 or 4 goes to get it, and can't really.
No, it's fantastic. Very difficult to do with a guy who's riding at that speed. I don't know how fast he was going, but even so,
he's jumping a fair way.
Yeah, it was crazy. Jump that big, that's huge.
Every time, everyone held their breath every time he jumped, because it was that dark. It just seemed insane.
When he landed, there was no lights on.
There was one LED light near where he landed, and so I was lighting him up with flash. There was one tiny video light, basically just pointing away from the area, so he could basically just see that. So he had a rough idea of, But that being said, this guy has jumped this jump a lot, heaps. Over and over and over again in the daytime. He could do it, and he's one of the best riders on the planet. So it was safe. But we were pretty stoked with it. It was fun. Fun
that's
challenge.
Brilliant.
So
very nice.
Cool. I guess we should leave it there.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been great chatting with you boys and everybody else online. I see a few familiar faces here, which is really good.
Yeah. Are these ones come up yet, Jimbo? Richard is the guru.
No, just that after.
Kim Payne.
Yeah, Kim's a very good photographer from near Sydney, and very
awesome. Good. Lonnie, thank you, gentlemen. Great podcast.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, Lonnie.
Mark, thank you for this video. I appreciate your commitment to the community.
Good on you, Mark.
And then Grant is surprised that Jim isn't in line for the Z8 launch already. That's what he's
Hang on, isn't that Wednesday? Is it Wednesday they're announcing that?
Yeah, 10 p.m. We're thinking about going live and watching the live stream. Maybe we'll see.
I'd really laugh if they called it something else.
Yeah, we'll see. Awesome. We'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. And hang on the line for 1 second, Richard, when we hold this off.
Maybe as well, before we jump off, where can people find you anyway?
Well, just Nightscape Images is the name. So webpage, nightscapeimages.com.au, or YouTube, Nightscape Images, Instagram, Nightscape Images, or
Facebook.
It's all the same name. It's all
perfect.
Track him
just
down
in case anyone wants to find out where you are.
Yeah, and if you're close enough,
I'm always happy to chat.
Get on a workshop if you can, if you're nearby. It's it'll change the way you think about night skies.
They sell out pretty quick. They're all sold out this year.
Oh wow! Okay, never mind then. Don't.
I've got a few people coming from overseas next year.
Wow!
In fact, I had a lady from Canada last year, 2022, book in for 2024.
Whoa!
She's well organised. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's
a testament.
I haven't even set the dates yet for next year.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, it's been
Wow.
good talking, guys. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks everyone
you.
for tuning in.
Thanks so much for all of your time. Goodbye, everyone. Hang on the line for 1 second, Richard, while I end the broadcast. And catch us in the next one.
See you on Wednesday night, everyone.
Z8 launch.
Yeah.